Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to a special edition of Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains on this May 3rd, 2022. Tonight, it is open lines, open topics. The show is all about you. This is the show where you are the guest, so we hope that you call in. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what's going on. We'd love to have some conversation about whatever is on your mind, be it esoteric, metaphysical, paranormal, spiritual, religious, or otherwise. Tonight, it's whatever you want to talk about. The number to call is 347-514-7150. That's 347-514-7150. Enter PIN number 376-8923 to get into the queue. My co-hosts, Jamie Wolfe and Father Chris Yates, will be joining us as well. Don't go away. Hello, everyone. I hope all of you are out there are having a fantastic evening. I am very excited to be with you here in this first of several summer specials that we will be offering between our seasons. We'll be coming back on a more full-time basis, probably back around August or September or so. But until we get to that point of the year, we'll be doing some specials. I'll try to do at least one a month. Just so that we don't go too long without seeing each other and, having some good discussion and keeping my brain sharp for using all this equipment. And it doesn't make me look like I don't know what I'm doing, because I'll tell you, you don't do this for a month, for a month, and my brain just throws it out. It's like, well, we don't need that information anymore. Just tosses it aside and kind of have to relearn it all over again. So if I at least do it once a month, it stays somewhat fresh, and then I can bring a better show to you, because I have to engineer it all myself. Believe it or not, I don't have the help with that. I don't have some engineer behind the scenes that's making all the magic happen. It is really all up to me. And so I have to not only do the engineering for the show, make sure the stream's working, make sure there aren't any problems, solve any problems that come up, but also sound like a coherent talk show host and, interview guests and come up with, conversations that are enjoyable to listen to and at least somewhat educational. And that could be a bit of a challenge, but hey, it is what it is. And I enjoy doing it. I really do. And that's part of the reason why I want to do these specials, is because I really like being here, spending these evenings with you on, Tuesday, just kind of talking about the stuff that we talk about. And, speaking of talking about things, I guess I should mention, for those of you who might not be familiar or have seen it, if you're not following my social media directly, which these days is basically Instagram and the Nicolean social media network. I don't really spend much time on Facebook, although I am there as well. But you might have missed this announcement. I was asked to actually sign up and to connect Vestiges After Dark with a new platform called Wisdom. And Wisdom is exactly what it sounds like. It's actually a platform where you can go and listen to certain experts share their wisdom. And this is a platform that lets them do that. It's not like traditional social media where there's like all these comments and posts and things. What it does is it provides a space, a private channel, if you will. But it's public because anybody can access anybody's channel. But it's your own channel where you can give talks and people can come in and listen to your talks. And if they like the things that you talk about, they can follow you. And there's no commentary. There's no chat room that disrupts the conversation. But you can call in to a live talk and actually, the host can choose to bring you on to further the discussion. It's kind of like what we do here on Vestiges, only it is strictly just like like a virtual auditorium where a professional can go and share their insights, and people that are listening can ask to come on and, ask a question or give a comment or something like that. But there's no chat room and there's no commentary, which I kind of like, actually, because a lot of the things that make social media so toxic is that people can do hit and runs, right? You can create a fake name, put a fake picture up there, and you can go and spam someone or troll someone, and nobody knows who you are, and you get away with it. And we don't even hear your voice. You just go in and type some asinine comment, and we all know, if you remember the years when I was on Twitter, you know what that was like. And now that Elon Musk purchased Twitter and maybe we'll be releasing all of our permanently banned accounts, you might see my account come back up there. But I can tell you right now, I will never use it in the capacity that I once did because I don't want any of that toxicity in my life. I don't need it. But I would probably, and this is one of the questions from the ether this week. I've got two of them for you. They're kind of, I guess snarky ones, but we'll get through it. And let's just jump right into that right now. So questions and comments from the ether. The first one is, and this was asked of my wife, and I think we can ask Jamie in a minute when we bring her on, if she's heard this too. But people have been asking if Elon Musk opens up all of the suspended accounts, because he's a big proponent of free speech and does not like the way the platform has gone under the management that exists. And I agree with him. I think Twitter sucks. And if he can make it better, then all the power to him. I think it's great. But people are like, if he opens it back up and I get my account back, because I still don't know what I was banned for, by the way. I still have no clue what that was about. I never did anything any different on any other day than I did every other day that I had an account on Twitter. I was always a controversial person. But they said I broke their rules, but what rules? I don't know. They don't tell you. And, that's part of the problem with their management, is that there's no communication. There's no transparency. Hopefully Elon Musk can change that. With his new ownership, but we'll see where it goes. But the question is, will I come back? Will I come back to Twitter? Because people apparently miss me there. And I had I had over 20,000 followers there. So it is a shame that I lost connections with a lot of those people. But at the same time, it's like, well, it's not like you can't come follow me on the Nicolay Network. So if you really miss me that bad, you'd find a way, right? Because other people did. So I'm not sure you miss me all that much if you didn't take the time to come over to the network and stick around and stay, because we opened up a great platform, and, it's very accessible, very easy. It's completely free. There's really no excuse other than the fact that you don't want to be bothered. And so it's like, well, so why should I care so much if you're upset that I'm not on Twitter? Come on. It's not like I'm hiding in a closet now. I'm available. Just come to where I'm available, right? If I mean that much to you, just come to where I'm available. And I'm on Instagram. You can follow me there. If you don't want to do the Nicolay Network because you think it's too churchy or, it's too personal, I don't know. Come over to Instagram then. Find me on Facebook if you're on Facebook. If you don't like Instagram and Facebook, well, then the Nicolay Network's your best bet, right? Because I'm not going to misuse your data like they do. I'm not going to sell your data so that, some company can get insights into your buying habits and, go out there and try to get you to buy other things and have all this creepy stuff pop up on your Facebook feed. I'm not going to do that. The Nicolay Network is one of the safest places you can come. So come. Just look it up. Go to esotericcatholic.org and click on The social media, our social media network link, I think is, well, I can tell you exactly what it is. I can bring it up here right now. If you go to the esotericcatholic.org, that's our website. And if you go to the menu at the top of the page, you will see a link for, where is it here? Join our social media network. It's right there. And just click on that and you will be connected. And it doesn't cost a thing. And even though we have toyed around with the idea of charging a nominal fee to try to keep riffraff off and bots and other things, we still have not done that. And I have no plans to ever do that. So you should be able to come over and have no problem. And then we can continue to chat like we used to on Twitter, only without all the trolls. So that's a good option, which kind of leads into the second question and comment from the ether this week. Because, there's a crazy thing that kind of happened, or happens on a near regular basis. And that is people going into the direct messaging system for our social media. Now on Instagram, it's blocked, so you can't do it there. Although, well, no, you can do it. It's just I have it where I don't get notified if people send direct messages. So if you're sending me direct messages on Instagram and I'm not answering, it's because I'm not even set up to see them. There's a reason for that. Because the one question I get more than any other question at all, that has nothing to do with an actual problem, is, are you available to chat? You see this all the time on Facebook, on Instagram, when I do go into what messages I'm missing. Even sometimes on the Nicolayan network, people will throw out a direct message to me and say, are you available to chat? And the answer to that is, I am never available to chat. You know why I don't do that? Because there's too much liability having a private conversation with you that I don't even know who you are. I'm not about to put myself in that kind of situation. Now, if you think I'm being a little bit too cautious, certainly you've been watching a little bit, if not a lot, of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, and you can see just how much lawyers love to take text messages and misrepresent them according to their agenda, right? Their little platform. That's what lawyers do best, is they manipulate things. And so they take things out of context and then use that against you. All right. So because I am such a target, people love to try to screw around with me. And, God knows what other malevolent plans are out there to try to entrap me or make me say something that can be misconstrued in the future. I just don't put myself in that kind of vulnerable position because I'm too smart to do it. So if I'm ignoring your private messages, it's not because I want to, it's because I have to. It's the smart thing to do. I am a public figure and I cannot be put in a situation where I'm going to be having private conversations. Now that's number one. Number two, the other reason is, even if I were to be fully protected and everyone had honest intentions and I would, love to talk to everybody, I don't have the time for that. And you know how many messages come in on a daily basis? I would be doing nothing but texting this person, that person, this person, left and right. I can't do it. So if you're coming to my social media or my social media accounts, which are largely run by my office, not so much by me, but I do check on it from time to time. I do try to read everything. I do read the emails that get sent to me, although I don't respond to them all because there's just too many. If there's something out there that, if you're just wanting to know if I'm available, no, I'm not. And this is why. I don't have time. I don't have time. Even if I could legally protect myself to talk to people that I don't know in a chat room, a private chat, I still wouldn't have the time to do it. Okay. There's too many messages that come in. So, if you need the help of this church, okay, because that's typically what most people are reaching out for, is they want my attention because they want me to come because they think they got some kind of spiritual problem they want to ask. Okay. So first of all, let's say you just have a question. I'm giving you right now an entire 3-hour show where you can ask me anything you want. Call into the show. But I'm not going to give you little private conversations in direct messaging. I'm not doing that. But if you want to come on a public show and talk to me publicly, I'll answer your question. You don't have to tell me. We don't even have to give your name on the air. Just call in. If that's still too much for you, you can come to the chat room on YouTube and ask questions then. I make myself available. You can come to the Nicolaitan Network, and there's a whole section there to ask Bishop Bryan a question, and people use it. That's where a lot of the questions from the ether come from, actually. And that's another way that you can get a correct response from me. But if you're looking for like a private conversation, I'm not going to give you that. Too much liability, and I don't have the time. Now, if you're looking for help, like you want me to come in and evaluate a case, well, look, I'm never going to be more than one person. I don't have the power. I know that some people think I'm larger than life, but I don't have the power to divide myself into all these little people and go and bilocate and be in different locations at different times. I can't do that. Okay. So there's no way that I will ever be able to go to every case for every person that needs help. It's just, I don't have the time or the ability to do that. But it's assuming, yours is a case that we end up picking, which these days is probably more of a lottery win than it is anything else, because we're kind of not entirely picking at random, but we know what to look for the kind of cases that we want to work. And if yours happens to be one of the cases that we're looking for, you could be called up for us to come. And now that the godforsaken masks are off the planes, at least for now, we're returning to national travel again. So that means that we can, start exploring out-of-state cases again. These are things that we will be looking at in the future. And I will be putting up the intake form on the website for us to be able to take your requests again, so that we can look at cases directly. So I'll probably go over the form with Jamie in the weeks to come, just to make sure that there's no information on there that should be updated. Maybe we need to revise the form so that maybe we can get different data collected. We'll look at it and see if anything needs to be revised. But we're going to start taking cases again. Now, that being said, most of you do know that part of the reason why we're doing this hiatus, and I haven't been live streaming the Mass regularly. I've actually been on a bit of a sabbatical, so we haven't even held Mass. We are holding Mass this week, though, so you'll at least have, and we'll stream it, so you'll be able to log into that if you miss it. But part of the reason we're doing that is that we're also in the process of moving. And one of the things that I'm trying very hard to do, in fact, we're having a board meeting tomorrow to discuss it, is I'm trying to make it so that the church and my move can coincide and happen at mostly the same time, and minimize the amount of time we go without having it back, because I do want to bring the weekly masses back, as well as solemnities or special days or something like that. And I just don't want to be streaming that regularly out of my home anymore. Now I'm doing big ones right now. So I'm doing an Easter Mass. So that's this week, just so that we're not losing touch. And I don't want the community to feel abandoned in any way, because I haven't abandoned you. It's just, I'm very busy and I'm trying to make this work. I'm trying to get this done, and it's very complicated. There's, legal issues, there's tax issues, there's all sorts of things that have to be worked out administratively. So that's kind of slowing up returning to normal operations too. But if all goes well in a very short period of time, we hope to be able to be back to normal with our live stream, and also within a reasonable amount of time, maybe be able to start seeing clients on holy ground again. Not a full-length mission church. I don't think it would ever be viable to open up a full-length church again, but at least have a small little public chapel where people can come and exorcisms can be performed and that kind of thing. And then the Mass can be streamed from there as well, and maybe a small number of people attending, that kind of thing, but not like an open facility. And we'll never have the resources, I don't think, coming in to be able to support a true public church. I mean, it'd be great. But I mean, we had that and nobody supported it. So why would they support this now? So we got to work, but we got to work smarter. And so what I'm working on is trying to find a way that benefits everybody that does work for this church and spends all their time doing it, making sure that it's no longer making unreasonable sacrifices and taking on, huge debts to keep the church going. We're trying to make it where now it works for everybody that does work for it. And then that can in turn trickle down to all of you so that it works for you. If at the very least you get your mass back live streamed on a weekly basis, and at the very most, maybe a little place where people can come when they're in town and visit. So these are things that we're working on. But at the very least, I'd like to have a location on holy ground where we can see clients, because I really do not like doing exorcisms in people's homes. It's not a good idea. It's not smart. There is a liability with that, and it's also problematic from a spiritual point of view. So that's really what's going on, and that's what's kind of slowing us down. Okay. So bear with me. This is a lot to do in a short period of time, and I'm trying to do it fast. And, I got to sell this house and move into a new one, and I got to find one that works for what we're trying to do. And also to be able to do the church at the same time. So it's involved, but we're working on it, and that's what we're getting at. Okay. So there you go. That's the answer to those questions from the ether. And so don't be asking me on social media if I'm available to chat, because I don't do that. Okay. Don't send me private messages. Unless I work with you, I don't respond to you. Okay. If I work, my colleagues, yes, I do respond with colleagues on a message. We tend to use a Signal though, because of the encryption. But I'm not a private message person. Okay. And particularly for people I don't know. And if you're just coming out of the blue and be like, are you available to chat? No, the answer is going to be no. Okay. Because I don't know you. And I have no idea what your intentions are. And from what I've seen, a lot of your intentions are not too good. So I'm not interested. Okay. Thanks, but no thanks. There are proper ways to get in touch with me. Use those proper channels. Okay. This is one of them. Vestiges After Dark, created for all of you so that you can ask your questions. And tonight we're taking them. The number to call is 347-514-7150. That's 347-514-7150. You can enter PIN number 376-8923. That's 376-8923 to get listed into the queue. And then if you call, we'll take the calls in the order that we receive them. And I do my best to try to get everybody a chance. Of course, we never really have too many callers. So usually if you call in, you will have an opportunity to come on the air and ask me whatever's on your mind. There's also the chat room on YouTube. Okay, that's the other primary way to ask questions tonight. And we are watching that. Jamie Wolfe is with us, and she's checking that out right now. How are you doing tonight, Jamie? Pineapple on pizza. I don't really typically like that, but when I was in Hawaii, we went to Oahu quite a few years ago. Actually, Tracy was pregnant with Levi. That's how long ago it was since we've been to Hawaii. But we went there and we stayed at the Hilton on Oahu, and fantastic tiki drinks. They were really wonderful, and they had a pizza place where you could go and get one of these Hawaiian style pizzas. But I'll tell you right now, the kind of pineapple that exists in Hawaii is nothing like the pineapple that we get here on the East Coast. It's a completely different flavor. It's so much sweeter. It's so much richer. Pineapple in Hawaii is amazing. And I will say true Hawaiian pineapples on a pizza is amazing. And I never would have thought I could say that, but I do not care for like Costa Rican pineapples or some of the stuff that you get here. And it's such a shame that here we are, Americans, right? And one of our states, one of its natural resources is the Hawaiian pineapple, and you cannot get Hawaiian pineapple in the continental United States. I dare you to try. Maybe on the West Coast somewhere they might have it, but you can't. I've never been able to find it on the East. Have you?
No, but then again, pineapple on pizza is abhorrent to me. So I don't go looking for it either. But no.
But I mean, pineapple. You like pineapple though? On its
own.
I do
love pineapple. Yeah. I love it cold and in a daiquiri.
Well, there you go. And I mean, I know you like pina coladas.
On pizza.
Not on pizza. I never liked it on pizza until I tried this one out there at the Hilton. That one changed me. Okay, so I'm good with it as long as it's true Hawaiian pineapple made the way they made it there.
Right.
But I would not get it. I would not get it just at any old place. I mean, another one, you want to know what the best pizza topping is? And people think I'm nuts. And everyone's like, I've never heard of that. That doesn't exist. I can't believe that's even true. And, I was watching a show. There's a show I've been watching when I run on the treadmill because I sometimes need to stop because there's a call that comes in or something. And I don't like having to be out there in the heat, dripping with sweat, running around outside. It's much easier for me to do that on my treadmill. So I run on my treadmill. Every day I'm getting back into it. I've been kind of falling off the wagon a bit, but I mean, I've gotten back into it. And, when I run, I get bored. I find exercise to be the most boring thing that you can probably do, and which is why I have a hard time doing it. Not because I don't like exercising, I just don't like how boring it is to sit there and do the same thing for an hour. And I run for about an hour when I run.
Yeah, I treadmill walk for about an hour 3 times a week because I can't run with my injury. But
right. Yes.
Stalk YouTube videos and go down rabbit holes, so it goes pretty quick.
So,
yeah.
So I put on a show. I put something on Amazon, or Netflix or something, and I'll watch shows while I run. And when I finish a series, I'll just move on to another series because typically I don't have time to watch much TV. So this is my time to watch TV is usually when I'm running on the treadmill. So there's a show I've been watching that I meant to catch when it started coming out. And I think it's in its last season now. But it's called Billions. It's actually a really good show.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good show, financial show. But it also has a lot of drama and intrigue, kind of like a modern day Dallas is what it is. And the episode I watched today, I think it was from season 3, the guy literally made this pizza. So I have now pop culture proof that this pizza does indeed exist, and there's clearly popular enough that people know about it, and they actually included this into the show. And that pizza is what they called in Chicago an Aussie. Now, it's not a Chicago style pizza, it's a New York style pizza, but in Chicago they called it an Aussie. I don't know what they might call it in New York, because the first time I ever saw it was in Chicago. But what it is, and it's a clam, bacon, and garlic pizza.
I mean, I would eat that.
Yes,
I would totally eat that.
And I'm telling you,
Those flavors
Jamie,
would meld together absolutely wonderfully.
It's like Clam's Casino on a pizza.
Right.
It's so very good, and of course, there's no shells. It's just the clams that have been removed from the shells and put on the pizza. It's absolutely delicious. And when I tell people about it, or if I go to sometimes I'll go to an Italian pizzeria and I'll be like, can you make this for me? And if they have clams, like linguine and clams on the menu, then I know they at least have clams. So it's like, can you make me a clam, bacon, and garlic pizza? And they're like, you want clams on your pizza? It's like, no, well, not the shells. I just want the meat. I always think that they want me
to work for it, man.
Yeah,
put the shells on there.
Yeah, right. They think you want the shells. It's like, no. But I said, this is a real pizza. And they're like, I've never heard of anything like this. It's like, no, it really does exist. It's called an Aussie in Chicago. That's where I first saw it, but I know that it's out there. And now it was on the show Billions, so I know it exists. And it's delicious. Now, much better than a pineapple pizza, I'll tell you that right now.
Just give me a good old margarita pizza and I'm happy. I'm pretty basic when it comes to that.
Yeah. Margarita pizza is pretty good. I mean, it's kind of hard to go wrong with pizza. There's just a few things I don't care for. Like I can't stand mushrooms on pizza, but I love mushrooms every other way. But I don't like mushrooms on pizza. I don't like olives on pizza, but I love olives.
Oh, I hate olives.
Yeah, no, I love olives, but I only like them on their own. I don't like them on although I like them in, I guess I like them in Middle Eastern food, but I don't really care for it on a pizza. I don't like green peppers because I find that bell peppers kind of upset my stomach. Ironically, though, it's only bell peppers that do, thank God. Like I can eat poblanos, no problem. Spicy peppers, no problem. Like chilies, Thai peppers, no problem. But if I eat a bell pepper, it upsets my stomach every single time. So I avoid bell peppers, and they typically if you have peppers on pizza, it's a bell pepper they're cutting up. They're not doing poblano. So Yeah, there you go. So, all right. So I don't
I'm
know if
craving
have you been checking the chat to see if we've got our first questions here?
We do have a question from Peace Be Still.
Okay.
Can a curse or a hex be put on a Christian?
Ooh, that's a good question.
It
Can a
is a
curse
good
or a
one.
hex be put on a Christian? Yeah, I mean, a curse or a hex can be put on anyone, but whether or not that has
Takes
any
hold is another issue.
yeah, if it has an effect on you, is really up to you. So a curse or a hex has no effect on a person that has genuine faith and a relationship to God that utilizes that faith in a real way, not just in a lip service kind of way, but a real way. Like you're actually going out there and doing something with that faith. Faith means nothing unless you're doing something with it. That's what is meant in the New Testament when it says, faith without works is dead. What it's really referring to is the fact that you could have all the faith in the world, but if you don't actually utilize that faith, then it's kind of pointless. The faith is truly dead at that point. And dead faith doesn't save you, and dead faith can't protect you from spiritual risks. So yes, there's going to be people out there in the world that are working at a spiritual frequency that is very different from you. And there are people that can do harm this way. There are people that study things like black magic so that they can inflict people with curses. And there's even Christian curses that they have dug up from the 1st and 2nd centuries. Gnostics, who were a subset of now heretical Christians, but at the time they wouldn't have been considered heretical. They also were known to have certain incantations that could be used as hexes or curses against their enemies. So there's a long-standing tradition of this in the Middle East in particular, but also in the Western and Eastern mystical traditions. And they're real and they do work. But the effect that they have on you is really based upon your relationship to God. So a person that has a resilient relationship to God, is solid, is active in their faith, is not going to have much to worry about in terms of a curse, because there's nothing that anybody can send at you that's more powerful than the relationship you have with God. It just can't be done. But being a Christian is not going to exempt you from this. That's not sufficient. Being a Christian is just that first step, and you have to be a genuine one. You can't just claim that you're a Christian. You can't say, "Oh, I believe in Jesus. I believe that he was real. I believe he rose from the dead. I believe he died for my sins." I mean, that's all well and good. Those are foundational statements to make, but it's not enough to save you, and it's not enough to protect you from a curse. But if you actually actively participate in the Christian life and you live the life of a Christian to the best of your ability, then those risks from these kinds of things, black magic and whatnot, are mitigated as you move in deeper in that relationship with God. At the same time, a person that has no faith has no protection. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't craft a type of protection against these things. So even an atheist can be protected if their faith in their faith and their lack of faith is strong enough to protect them. Because a lot of how hexes work, is partly psychological. And that principle is known in psychology as the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I think it'd be largely psychological.
It is. So yeah. It's called self-fulfilling prophecy, also known as the placebo effect. Okay, so we know this. I'm going to give you an example of how magical this is. When I was a boy, 3rd grade, second, third, I was into everything. I mean, I was trekking through swamps, and I was picking up snakes and poisonous plants, and I was doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And I was a nature boy. Okay, I was out there, covered from head to toe in mosquito bites, scabs. I was a mess of a kid because I liked being out there in nature, and nature never really liked me too much. That's part of the problem. That's why I was covered in bites and everything. But I would trek through the swamps. I had my grandparents had several acres of land, and that's where I would, spend all my time, sometimes not even coming back till well after dark. Go out there and people wouldn't see me for hours. And I probably would have stayed out there for days if I had a means to have done it. But part of the thing that comes with doing this is that you pick up viruses and stuff. And so one of the things that I picked up was was warts. Warts are caused by surface viruses that get kind of stuck under your skin and then replicate and cause the thing that we call a wart. So in second, third grade, I had warts all over my hands from doing the crazy stuff that I did out in the woods, and who knows where I picked up some of these things. And it was getting to a point where it was, I guess, kind of unsightly. And the teacher sent me to the nurse to have the nurse look at it. And the nurse called my parents and said, you need to take them to a doctor to get these burnt off. Okay. Because they're unsightly and it's distracting the other kids, or I don't even know. But I mean, there was a lot of them, I have to say. It was pretty bad. And so, I didn't like the sound of having something burnt off, because I'm not thinking, we're using some kind of cryogenic formula. I'm thinking you're going to use like a flamethrower on me.
Right.
I'm a second grader.
They're going to hold you down, give you a stick to bite on, and burn the hell out of you.
Yeah, right. So my mother did some research on this, and she had an old medical book that probably wouldn't even be something you could even find today. But it had a lot of it was a legitimate medical book, but it had a lot of old remedies, because it was an old book, turn of the century kind of publication. And it had a whole section on how to cure a child from warts. And so she looked it up, and this is what it said to do. It said, fill a bottle of plain water, tap water, whatever, a spray bottle or just a medical bottle, and tell the child that this is a prescription from a doctor he trusts, and spray it on his warts, on the warts for a few days, and the warts will go away. And this is in this medical book. And so my mother did it. I remember it. And I remember even she made it really kind of real, because she's like, okay, now this might sting a little bit. And I remember it burning. I remember it like stinging. And it's like, this was just water. She didn't tell me about this until I was an adult, many, many years later. But at the time, this is what she told me. She says, I had a doctor, I had a pediatrician that I very much liked, and I very much trusted. And so anything he said to do, I would have done. And if he said that this was the medication I needed to take to get rid of the warts, I was taking it, even if it stung a little bit, which it shouldn't have, because it was just plain old tap water. But I didn't know that. So she sprayed it on. Okay, she sprayed it all over. I remember it burning. I think I even cried a little bit. And I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and they were all gone. The next morning.
Imagine that.
All gone. That's placebo effect. Okay, that's how powerful the brain is. And it's real. And that's how curses work.
That's why you have a placebo group in some of these medical drug tests.
Yeah, absolutely. And because there is it's a real phenomenon. We know about it. The brain can, and part of it's probably not all mystical and supernatural. And part of it is that the brain probably has the ability to produce certain chemicals it needs to heal itself. It's just, for whatever reason, we're cut off from those functions. We just haven't evolved maybe to the point where we know how to use them, or maybe we've evolved away from trusting them. But whatever the reason is, the brain seems to have a remarkable ability to heal itself. And so my theory is, by having belief that this formula that was really just plain old tap water, the reason it healed was that it convinced my brain to produce the type of reaction that was needed to get rid of them. The magical part was that they went away like overnight. Because that's like, even if you were to have them burnt off or taken care of some other medical way, it wouldn't be almost a near instant reaction. Like you go to bed, you wake up and they're all gone. I mean, it wouldn't be like that. There'd be, a period of time that it would take before, you wouldn't see them anymore. This was
they'd have to dry up.
Yeah, have to dry up. These didn't. They were literally, they disappeared. And it was surprising to all of us, but my mother reacted like, I can't believe this. And I didn't realize why that it was such a shock to her. Because I didn't know about the tap water. I'm like, well, of course it worked. It was my doctor. I mean, his name was Dr. Alec Paula. I said, Dr. Alec Paula, I mean, everything he prescribes works. So, of course it works. But I didn't know that it really didn't come from him. I didn't know it was just tap water. And then years later, my cousin, who I was taking care of, had a plantar's wart on the bottom of her foot. And those can be very painful if you ever had one.
I have.
Yeah, I think everybody's had one. I mean, particularly if you don't, if you're used to not walking around without shoes on.
Yeah, I was a very active barefoot child for a while. So
then yeah. And your skin is if you're not going barefoot all the time and building those calluses, then you leave a lot of opportunity for the virus to come in. Once you build that callus, you don't get them anymore. But children tend to get them because their feet are softer. And sure enough, she got a plantar's wart. And you know what? I tried that method, and it didn't work overnight like it did for me. But within a week, it was gone, and it was just with tap water. And she didn't know. And I did the same thing. It's like, this is going to sting a little bit. And, she reacted, but she did it and it went away. So that's kind of how curses work. Now, so what that means is that our faith is powerful and our mind is powerful. So even a person that's completely atheist, has no spiritual protection whatsoever, if they don't believe in curses and if they have full confidence in the scientific worldview, that becomes its own kind of protection and will mitigate that risk from happening. So the goal, I would say, for all people, if you believe in curses, which I do because I've seen them work and I know about them and I've studied them. So I know that they exist. I can't take the atheist route and say, well, that's all a bunch of superstitious nonsense, so it can't affect me. No, I'm not going to go that route. I go the religious route because I understand also that there's nothing more powerful than God, and my relationship to God is the most powerful thing that I have, and that can protect me from anything. So that's how I go about it. But for those that might not feel as confident in their relationship to God, or maybe are still in the process of building it, or maybe uncertain, maybe they're agnostic or something, they just don't know. The best thing that you can do is to always remember that nobody has any authority to violate you spiritually unless you let them. Okay. So there's, I consider curses and hexes to be a type of rape. That you're raping that person. When you attack someone with a curse, you are a spiritual rapist. And you are as despicable as one who does it sexually, as far as I'm concerned. I don't see a difference. The only difference is the law only cares about the physical, but I care about the spirit too. You have no right to violate a person's spirit like that. Okay. And so that cursing someone, putting a curse on someone, is a type of rape. And what you're doing is you're violating them. And if they're vulnerable in the same way that a victim of a crime like that is vulnerable, then you're taking advantage of their vulnerability and using it. So my advice to everybody is, don't let yourself be vulnerable spiritually. Don't put yourself in that position.
Don't give in to any doubt or fear.
No.
So I know a lot of times it starts off with threats, and that little seed of fear starts to grow, and then that opens a door for the actual curse or hex to come in. It
does. And when you look at how people do the cursing thing, when you look at how it happens, it does start out often with this notion of very gentle manipulation and gaslighting. That's kind of how it starts, particularly if the person knows you. But I mean, there are people that, that can become so fearful of curses and that they've been put under a curse, that becomes the curse itself. That, I mean, you could actually put someone at risk just by virtue of making them believe that they've been cursed. So it's a lot of it has to do with the power of the person's mind, and manipulating them, and so the best defense is to not let yourself be manipulated. The second best defense. The best defense is have a relationship with God. You don't have to worry about it. But the next best defense, if you are having trouble with that, is to just don't put yourself into a spiritual vulnerable position. Hope that answers the question. What's the next one, if there is one?
So, Teresa would like to know how you and Tracy met.
Oh my God, that is a question. My God, I mean, do we have
a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away?
Oh my. Well, it's there's a metaphysical story to it. And let me see if I can give like a Reader's Digest version, so that it's not, I mean, there's a lot of details that are going to be difficult to go through, but let me try to come up with it. So, many, many years ago, I had a dream. Okay. I've always been an avid dreamer, and I've been really someone that, could have very, I guess you could say lucid kind of dreams.
Well, before you go too deep, Tracy is trying to make it clear that you were her skydiving instructor. So you may have just ruined that plot line, but continue, sir.
There you go. So I dreamt. You remember Lion King, the movie, the original movie, the cartoon, the Disney cartoon Lion King, right? Great cartoon. All right. I had been watching my uncle is a dentist, and a cosmetic dentist. And one of his hygienists had some problem with her babysitter or whatever, and she asked me if I wouldn't mind watching her kids for this particular summer, like on and off. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'm not doing anything else. I didn't really take a summer job. I've always found like, summers in college were just times to relax, because I was also burnt out from the school year that I didn't really feel like working through the summer too. So, I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll watch your kids. And they would have Lion King on like 24/7. So I saw it, and it was like in my mind. And so, normally when you have that much exposure to something, it kind of gets stuck in your subconscious, and then you kind of, start dreaming it. And I figured that that's all this was at first, but, I had a dream, where I this time, instead of, dreaming about the Lion King, I dreamt that I was Simba. and I was, walking, and I met the female lion in that story, which I guess is Nala, and something had happened. I'm trying to remember exactly, because it was a long time ago. Something had happened where she tells me something that I need to immediately go to my computer to type down. So I immediately rush out of the dream world of this like savannah, this African savannah, and I'm running as this lion cub to my computer, and I've got, I'm trying to type, but I've got these big paws and I'm not able to type. And so I'm getting really frustrated, banging my paws on this computer screen, on the computer keyboard, and not being able to get any words out. But I knew I had to type this message, because she told me, you need to send a message to Nala Cub. And I'm like, I can't, I'm not, my paws don't work. And I guess it was the process of banging my paws on the keyboard that woke me out of the dream. And then, so I woke up, and I'm kind of like, boy, that was weird. And I went, I went over, got my coffee in the morning, because by this point it was morning. And I went over, and I couldn't shake it. You get those dreams where we talked about dreams like on the last episode with Amanda. You got these dreams where you can't shake the feeling. And so I thought to myself, it's like, isn't that weird? I wonder if there is really like a Nala Cub that I needed to send a message to. So this was back in the days of America Online. You remember America Online, where it had like, you know, a whole community. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it had a little community of people that you could actually like search their profiles and find people that had similar interests to you. You know, it was kind of like a precursor, I guess, to what Facebook became. But it was definitely less than Facebook in that sense. It was more like message boards and instant messages and chats and things like that. So I went to America Online, you know, and yes, a dial-up modem. So I had that stupid noise, and I started typing, I went to the search and I just typed in Nalakub. And sure enough, 3 names popped up with that name, and one was online. And I thought, okay, so when you could find someone on the America Online software, and keep in mind, this is before the creepy days of the internet. Okay. I know people today would be like, I mean, this is weird, you know? Yeah, you wouldn't do this at all today because the internet's gone creepy, but this was back in the day when generally only nerds used it. All right. So it was a fairly safe environment. You didn't really worry about things like that. And American Online was about communicating and connecting with the community. So I found this Nalakub online, and I sent an instant message to her, and I said, I think we should talk. And that person on the line was Tracy. And I didn't know that. And so we just chatted back and forth for months, you know, not really talking about anything except just things that we would talk about, that we found that we had a lot of mutual interests, and we talk about philosophy and the paranormal and other things. And then you know, it's like, then she was like, well, whatever got you into, why'd you reach out to me anyway? Like, why do you think we should talk? You know? And so I eventually said, well, I had this weird dream. And I said, I felt that, you know, that I needed to do this. Now, and I forgot a major part of this story. I'm sorry. A big part of the dream that I failed to mention was that when Nala in the dream said I needed to go send a message to Nalakub, I found that that what she had, the face that she had, the lion face, was actually a mask. And when she said you needed to go and send a message to Nalakub, she took the mask down, half down her face, so that I could see from the nose up. And that's what prompted me to go and try to type the message. I forgot to mention that's important because of this next part. So she asked me what made me do this. And I said, well, I had a weird dream that I had to. And I said, you know, and I told her the dream, and she's like, well, do you remember what she looked like in the dream? You know, the face that was behind the mask? And I know that you can't see the whole face, but could you tell me about at least the part that you could see? And I said, well, I mean, I can draw it. You know, I'm a mediocre artist. I could probably be a really great artist if I spent a lot of my time doing that. And maybe with a bigger house, I'll put a little art studio in and maybe get really back into art in a serious way. But I was adequate enough that I could sketch this out from memory. And so I sketched it out, and I scanned it, and I sent it to her. And this was back in the days where it took like 5 hours to upload something like that. You know, so about 5 hours later, she gets the picture. And I said, so what do you think? Does this look like? Because I had no idea what she looked like. Remember, it was very hard to send a picture to someone back then because it took so long through dial-up. And so I said, does this look like you? And she goes, oh my God, it is me. And so eventually I said, well, can you actually send me a picture of you so I could see? And then, you know, sure enough, it was very clear to me that, yes, this is the person that was in the dream. And so we stayed connected. Of course, I was in a relationship at this time. So it wasn't, you know, something that I would have pursued as anything more than just an interesting encounter online with a, you know, person that seemed to have a lot of my mutual interests. So we chatted for years and talked about the various things, but only, you know, ever as friends. And then when my relationship ended, I guess we lost contact after a while, and then she sent me a message and asked me how things were going and what my relationship, how things were going with my relationship at the time. And I said, well, I ended that relationship. And then that's when we started to wonder if there was more to this than just simply meeting somebody that was of like mind on the internet. And then it turned into what eventually turned into 20 years of marriage. So there you go. 20 years of marriage and an 11-year-old kid. That's the short version. There's a lot more to it, but I mean, the rest of this is just the nitty-gritty details, but that's how we met. So not recommended today. Okay. I don't recommend you go looking for people on the internet today, but back in the early days of the internet, it wasn't as bad as it is right now. So yeah, I would never advise my son be like, oh, well, when you found this nice girl online, oh, you got to go and, pursue that. No, I wouldn't, wouldn't recommend it. So there you go. That's how we met. So of
course, it's not your typical boy meets girl story. Not when you're involved.
No, it can't be.
Some kind of metaphysical twist to it.
Always is. I mean, I can't say that I've ever had a normal life, Jamie. I mean, I've lived, every moment of my life in the strangest of ways, always an outlier, never following the norm. I'm a controversial person, but I mean, I'm the first one to say that some of that is the result of the fact that I've never really known normalcy. Even going back to my earliest childhood, my earliest memories of childhood. I had angelic encounters in my youth that totally shaped who I was and who I would become. These are my first memories. My first memories are not the usual things of like going to preschool or something, or, other things that people might remember. I mean, think back to what's your earliest memory? It's usually a benign thing. My earliest memory is going off into the woods and meeting with celestial beings. And there was a time where, people tried to convince me that was just imaginary. That was like imaginary friends or something, because I was so young. I was like, 4 when this was going on.
If only people knew that imaginary friends may not be so imaginary.
Not so imaginary. Well, see, we know that, and we know that now. And I think a lot of our audience knows that now,
yeah.
But, back in the day, when your kid said that that they saw angels in the woods, you just would say, "Oh, that's nice."
Yeah, okay, that's cute.
That's cute. But maybe if people want me to, I can talk about that story when we come back. But right now, we're just going to take a little break here. We're at the top of the hour, and hopefully Father Chris will be joining us. I don't know. Did he forget? He's supposed to be here.
I've not seen him in the chat room.
He must have forgotten. Well, I guess it's just going to be us. I don't know can we carry 2 more hours? I hope so.
We can try.
All right. Well, you guys out there.
I'll see if I can reach out to him.
Okay. And you guys in the chat room, it's up to you. Okay. So call in and give us your questions, and we'll keep the chat going. We'll be right back after this.
changed everything. The way I walk, the way I breathe. Will my fate shift into the night? But here I am, same old thing. Sinking deep, no ecstasy. Reality haunts the living mind. If I saw another day, only to scream into the night. Nothing ever tries to change, even if I want to realize. 'Cause I've been sitting here, same old ways, taking off without the same mistake. Darling, where you going? Won't be as simple for you. Time won't change anything if I don't know how to breathe. The current that pushed against the tide. Maybe once, maybe twice. Turned around to save the time. Now I know how to leave the side. If I saw another day, only to scream into the night. Nothing ever tries to change, even if I want to realize. 'Cause I've been sitting here, same old ways, taking off without the same mistake. Can I leave it all behind? Follow all the leading signs. When the dark is growing and the light is closing, darling, where you going? Won't be as simple for you.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark. I'm Bishop Bryan Willett. I'm here with my co-host, Jamie Wolfe, and we are talking about whatever is on your mind. It is your show tonight, and so we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call, 347-514-7150. That's 347-514-7150. Enter PIN number 3768923 to get into the queue. I'll have that number back up on the screen here so that you don't miss it. And if you have a question, also in the chat room on YouTube, let us know. We'll be back here in just a moment, and I'll answer a question of somebody did ask me to talk more about that angelic experience in the woods, so I'll tell that story when I come back. Don't go away. I'm sorry, everybody. I realized that when I was at break that I never actually finished what I was getting at about the Wisdom app. I went off on a tangent and never came back to my whole purpose for talking about it. But yes, I was asked to link Vestiges After Dark on Wisdom. So I've been given some talks there, and you can go to the Wisdom app. You can download it on your iPhone or your Android. Any smartphone, I think, has it. Doesn't really have like a web browser counterpart. So it's basically for smart devices. But it is a fantastic app. And I like the fact that it eliminates all the toxicity, which makes the talks there much more professional. There's always somebody talking about something. And I guarantee you, you'll find something there worth listening to. And I'm there. And I was invited as a top expert, or what do they call it? I think it was like a top something or other. So I've got a little check mark there. My first check mark.
Twitter for years to get a check mark.
Twitter ignored my check mark for a year, but Wisdom gave me one before I even signed up. So that just goes to show you I like these people there at Wisdom. But the podcast is linked there, and I give talks there, like usually about an hour, but you can give a longer talk if you want to. It's all recorded. The first 2 hours of every talk is recorded, and you can go back and listen on demand of anything that happened there. My last talk was last week, I believe, and we talked about ashes, because one of the questions that had come in on the Nicolay Network was about the dangers of retaining the ashes of a loved one. And if anybody wants us to talk a little bit more about that tonight, we can, because it's an important subject that I never get tired of talking about, because it is so important to drive home the importance of resting ashes. But that's what the talk was. So you can go back and listen to that one if you want to. It's a great app, Wisdom. All right, check it out and look me up and follow me there. Okay, so before we get back to taking questions and everything, there is a question that I saw. Didn't see who it was. Maybe you did, Jamie, but they were asking, they wanted me to talk about the experience in the woods in my first angelic encounter. So I'll talk about that a bit briefly here. So when I was around 4 years old, probably the latter end of 4, but when I was around 4, I was over my grandparents' house. And one of the things I like to do, and I say things like, we were a lot freer back there in the 1970s than we are today. And yeah. And, it was nothing for a 4-year-old to go off into the woods by themselves and play. I mean, you did that. All right. I played in the street, when I was 4. I mean, nobody thought anything about it. Nobody, caused me problems. I survived. I'm still here. But you don't really do that today. Probably be considered child endangerment today for all we know. But back then it was normal and it was free and I loved it. And I spent a lot of my times out in the woods, because as I said, my grandparents had acres of land and most of it was woods or swamp. And I liked them both. And that's where I spent my time. And so I would go up there every single day and not come back till it was very late. Or when I, sometimes I'd hear my name being yelled for me and I was like, okay, I better get back. But this was in the morning and I went up and I went to my usual spots because I had my favorite sections. Was a tree that had fallen down. And so I'd go and climb on that tree. And then there was a tree stump that someone had chopped down at some point many, many years ago. And I would keep trinkets inside it because, it could store things. And, I would paint rocks like gold and metallic gold and pretend I was digging up gold nuggets, and I did all sorts of crazy stuff as a kid. I'd make magic wands out of trees, twigs, and swords and everything else. I mean, it was like little Smurf adventures out there. I guess it was before the Smurfs because this was the 70s. But anyway, I was up there one day, and this particular day was a little bit different. It felt different. And I remember this very distinctly, that there was something strange about the atmosphere that day. It didn't feel the same. But I just went and did my normal things. And while I was, playing in what was like a dirt pit up there, where, had a lot of fine sand and probably broken glass and who knows what else. I heard a voice say, Bryan, it was just like that. I was like, Bryan. And so I turned around and it's like, who's there? Who was that? I thought somebody had followed me up there, and usually it didn't happen. Nobody ever really came up into the woods with me. So I wasn't used to encountering people in the woods. And so, it was like Bryan. And so I said, yeah, who is it? Or however a 4-year-old would, almost 5-year-old would respond. And I have very vivid memory of this. It's like very distinct. And they said, how did it go? It was something to the effect of, you cannot see us right now, but you will see us soon. And we would like you to keep coming back to this place. And that's all it was. And so I had this real intense, inclination that I needed to come back the next day. And I was over my grandparents' house almost every single day. So any day that I did go, sometime, I think I spent more time there than I did at my own home, just because it had the better property, it had the better yard. It was more to do for a kid like me. So I went out there and next day I went back up, and sure enough, I heard the voice, Bryan. And I said, who are you? And they said, you will see us in time. Again, that thing. And they said, this time we want you to go down and tell your grandmother that God is love. I remember that as clearly as the meal I had tonight. Go tell your grandmother God is love. And so I run all the way down, run the way back. It was quite a ways, run down this big hill, and ran into the house. And I went and found her. I said, hey, the people in the woods want me to tell you that God is love. And so my grandma's like, what?
No more sugar for you, kid.
The people in the woods? What are you talking about? There's people up there telling you that? I said, there's a voice up in the woods that's told me to tell you that God is love. And so she was kind of taken aback by this. Everyone else kind of dismissed it as me just being a crazy kid, because I was a crazy kid. I mean, Jamie, I've told you stories. So,
oh yeah,
you know how
he was a brat, y'all.
Probably not quite a brat, as much of one at this point in my age. That came a little bit later. The testosterone started kicking in, I guess, and that's when it all went to hell. But before that, I was.
What it was.
Yeah, I think it was. Around 12 years old, I got worse. No, when I was small, I was kind of cute, and I mean, I was mostly a good kid, and so, so she's like, okay, and so, and then the one thing that they'd said is make sure you come back the next time you're here, and so I did, and I went back. This is like the third time, okay, and I sat down in that little pit of sanded glass and broken glass, and I waited for them, and sure enough, the voice comes back and says, go back and tell your grandmother, God is love, and then come back tomorrow. And so I did it again, and so I said, hey, that voice in the woods is still telling me to tell you this. And she thought, this is really kind of strange. So later that week, she finds she was going through her yard and kind of like pruning bushes and stuff, and she found a little stone, a little white quartz that was naturally shaped like a heart. And she interpreted this to mean that there was like something trying to communicate with her, that the messages that I kept coming back, and she found it strange that I kept coming back and saying God is love, which is kind of it's a Bible verse for one thing, but right. I mean, I didn't read the Bible, and my family wasn't very religious, so I wouldn't have heard it from any of them. I didn't watch anything that would have had religious content. I didn't go to church. I wouldn't have heard anything. I wasn't going to I was 4 years old, so I wasn't like preschool, so I wasn't even going to, and it wasn't a Catholic preschool or anything. I wouldn't have heard this from anything or anyone. And that kind of, she started to take it seriously. And when she saw this rock, she thought that was a message, and she took it in. And so, later that day, they were getting all dressed up to go out. I don't remember where we were going, but I guess we were all going out to eat together. And I, of course, went up into the woods until it was time to go. And this time I went up there, and the voice said, go back and take a picture of your grandmother before she leaves, which I did. So I ran back down. There I go, running back down, all this way, running into the house. They're getting ready to leave. I went up to my grandmother. I said, hey, I've got to take a picture of you now. The voice wants me to take a picture of you. So you got to go get your camera. Now, this is before the days of digital, right? And nobody had a Polaroid at this point, in my family anyway. So she just had, it wasn't even 35 millimeter. It was like those little rolls of film and those little cheap cameras that didn't really take clear pictures, but everybody had those like little square pictures that you saw a lot in the 70s. She had one of these cameras. I forget the kind of film it was. But it was good for slides. You could convert this to slides, and that's why she liked it, because you could get slides from them, or you could get paper pictures that you could put into an album. And she was a big person for slides. So it was that kind of film. And so she's like, okay, we'll take a moment so you can take a picture. And so, they were trying to help me take the picture. And I was like, no, I need to take the picture. The voice told me I need to take the picture. They're probably thinking I'm schizophrenic at this point. I mean, God. And so my grandmother gets up, and now understand, everyone was leaving. Okay. So all the lights were off. Everything was off. That's important information here, because we're all getting ready to go. And I was slowing them up by doing this, but they were, I guess, when you're 4 years old, you get away with a lot. And I was an only child. So people kind of, it was easier to get away with stuff. And so I took the picture of her in front of the television, because that's right where you were before you left the house. And, took the picture and gave the camera back to her. And that roll didn't get developed for several months. And then when it did, she would convert them to slides. And then every now and then, when the whole family would get together, she'd take out the slide projector and show us all the recent pictures that she's been taking over, the period of time. And so a little bit, some time passes. I don't hear the voice in the woods after that for a while. And I don't, nothing really goes on. I still kept going up there. Eventually I started just playing. But eventually she develops the pictures and has the family over to look at the slides. And we're looking at the slides. And sure enough, the picture that I took of her that day was up on the screen. And so this would be something that would show up in the rotation every time we did this little slide thing. So for months, probably even years, this picture would keep coming back up. And every time it did, I would always tell everyone, hey, it's the God is love picture. And everyone just kind of laughed at it, and no one ever thought anything about it. And one day, many years later, now we're talking like, I probably was around 9 now. We were having the slides. I said, can we get the slides out? I'd like to look at the slides. And we took the slides up, and sure enough, that picture came up in the rotation. And I said, oh, it's a God is love picture. Because I always wanted to see it. And so I don't remember who it was, if it was my mother or someone, but they asked me, why do you call it that? Why do you call that picture the God is love picture? It's just your grandmother actually looking a little bit frustrated because they're trying to leave the house, and they were trying to leave and I was slowing them up. So it was clearly a picture taken in haste. I said, well, I mean, what do you mean? Why do I call it that? Look at what's written on the television screen. And they were like, what? I said, look at the television screen. And sure enough, in perfect glowing calligraphy is the words, God is love, on the television screen. And the television was off and nobody ever noticed that it was there. It was only I, as a kid, grew up seeing it there and took it for granted, just saying, oh, well, this is just part of this whole God is love experience that I've been having. So it wasn't really shocking to me. Now, in retrospect, I realized how significant it was, and it floored them all. They couldn't believe it because everyone knew that the television was off. And even if, let's say it was on, it wasn't, but let's say it was on, even the fact that it would have snapped that picture at that one moment right in the midst of this thing that had been going on is even significant enough, but it was not on. The TV was not on. And there it was in plain English, but in very glowing calligraphy. So I can look like it had a little glowing sparkle to it. I wish I had the picture to this day. When she died, all of that stuff got sent to her kids, and the grandkids got really nothing. And so I have no idea where that picture is today. I wish somebody would send it to me, or at least a copy of it online, because I would love to see it again. I haven't seen it in all these years, but that was the God is love picture. Now, many months after that reveal, when I was going up there, now probably approaching 10 years old, I went back to that area thinking about this and wondering about what it all meant when I heard the voice, and I hadn't heard it for years. And this time it called my name as it did in the past, and it said, are you ready to see us? And I mean, I think my response was like, well, yeah, I mean, I've been waiting all my life to see who this voice is. And just as plain and ordinary as an experience could be, despite the fact that it was so beyond normal, it felt perfectly natural, and there was no real fear to it. But out of the darkness of the woods, because there was like heavily treed and wooded areas, and so it would be very shaded, and parts of it would be quite dark even during the midst of a sunny day. Out of that came 3 glowing beings, and they just floated in front of me, and they communicated something to me that I don't really remember anymore, other than the fact that it was like information about the future, as I recall, things that would happen in my life. And there was a conversation that ensued that was very difficult to remember, almost like trying to remember a dream, although this was no dream. This really was happening in a waking state. For the next several months, I could see them. I would go back there and they would be there and they would communicate different things to me, and I would learn different things about all sorts of topics. Some of it would be metaphysical things. A lot of knowledge that I possess today that has been used in my work as an exorcist and a bishop came from some of these conversations that I had back then. So it was impactful. It was hardly just trivial. These were life-changing experiences. And I remember sometime around 12, I think it was, I was up there and I saw them, and they came to me and said that they would always be with me, but I would no longer be able to see them again. And then something to the effect of that I would be able to see them after I die. Something to that effect, as I recall, because it's difficult to remember all of the details that happened. But it was something to that effect. And sure enough, after that day, I had never seen them again. And then, I moved to Florida later and only returned there to see my grandparents maybe 2 more times. And then they died and the house got sold and the property was no longer accessible to me. So I can't really even go back there today and see if I could ever encounter them again. But it led me to believe that I wouldn't see them anyway, even if the house was still in the family and I could go there. But they never actually called themselves angels. They called themselves celestial beings, is what they called themselves, which I interpret to be an angel. And it was nothing but good that came out of it. And certainly was an incredible experience, and one that's difficult, I'm sure, for people that don't believe in angels to accept. But I can assure you it really did happen, and it is actually true. So
we need to go on a hunt for that slide.
I know. I wish somebody in the family, somebody's got it. I don't see, the problem is I don't really communicate with many people in my family anymore. So, there's not really anybody I would call today and say, hey, could you find this and send it to me? Because, family's a disappointment. Let's just put it that way. I'll leave it at that. They don't like what I do, and I certainly don't care for them. So, it's kind of a mutual feeling. There's a few people I still maintain communication with, but not many. I was never really very well liked or respected by either side of my family. So,
the black sheep.
Kind of, yeah, and indirectly, I guess it is. And it's not because I was there wasn't black sheep for black sheep's sake. It's just because I just did not think or live like they did, or have the interest that they had. I am a very different person, and part of it was this weirdness of my childhood, it's kind of hard to be a normal person growing up with experiences like that. That
kid's an oddball. Watch out for him.
Yeah, I think that's what went on. I think that's honestly what went on, but it is what it is. Calling in from the 615 area code. I think that's Joy Keeling. Is it Joy on the line?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, welcome to
Hello.
Vestiges. You're here for the between season special.
Yeah. Well, there was something that I was going to contact you about anyway. But before I get to that, I just want to touch real briefly on the discussion of curses.
Yeah.
Another thing that happens, which I've encountered multiple times in my life. It's really weird how many times this has gone on. People I will hear about later, people I've cut out of my life will think that I've put some kind of curse on them. And it's like, honey, you're already out of my life. I got what I wanted. Now, live your life.
Yeah.
But they get convinced that I've done something to them, and they convince themselves that they are cursed or hexed. And it's really their own bad decisions.
Yeah.
And living with the consequences of their own actions. But they convince themselves that they're cursed or hexed. And by doing so, curse themselves.
And it becomes a real thing. It's like a spiritual placebo is what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, I don't have to do anything to anybody. And I never, I've cursed, I put things on like 2 people. One was in like 1994. The other was like in 2015, I think. And none of them were the people who actually came back and said, "Oh, I think this person did something to me." I didn't do anything to any of them. They convinced themselves so badly that they actually thought themselves into creating a curse on themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's something, I wanted to bring up is if you believe that you've been cursed, guess what? You're making yourself cursed.
Yeah, you've made the curse real. You've given it grounding. And
exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that nobody's done anything to you. You believe it happened, and so you made it. So
absolutely.
That's another thing that people can encounter with that.
I knew
I was calling, and
I knew of, if I could stop you for just a minute, because it's in line with what you just said. I knew a Voodoo priestess who used to say, that when she was talking about the subject of curses, that they were completely unnecessary, to actually go through the effort of collecting all of the things and doing the sacrifices, because in real Voodoo, it's ritual sacrifice. They do kill animals. They do use the blood. And she used to say that she doesn't even have to do that. All she has to do is go to the store and buy a chicken. Of course, in the Caribbean, it's not like a clean chicken always. Sometimes they still have the feathers in the neck and everything. And she'll just throw the chicken on the doorstep of a particular house that she wants to scare.
That's all it's going to take.
And that's all it takes. And it scares the shit out of them. That's sufficient for her purposes, and she doesn't even curse them, because they end up cursing themselves out of the fear that, oh my God, they left dead chicken on my door. That means I'm cursed. Yeah. Yeah. And
another thing that has also happened is people have tried to put hexes on me, and of course, they're doing it for reasons they've created in their head. And so what they're aiming at is actually some image in their head that they've made. I haven't actually done anything. And the universe actually does kind of have a protection in place. If this person has done nothing wrong, your spell's going to hit you instead.
Well,
and the person who tried to hex me actually blew out her root chakra and had to go to the hospital with a severe urinary tract infection.
Yeah, it'll come back on you.
No,
she was trying to hex me for no reason.
That's like the law of three that you hear in Wicca. And there's even some traditions. I remember in the Genesene witch tradition, they say it comes back 9 times. So look out. Negative intention is usually going to just end up biting you in the ass. It doesn't really always hurt the person you would like it to go after. It just tends to be a way of sadomasochism of yourself.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But the reason that I was calling is, it's funny that you were telling the story about the angels in the woods, because I was calling about the girl in the painting.
Oh, yes.
And because you told that story, and you were talking about like reincarnation, like what if this is some past life, and I've got this aggregate structure that, this other person with this other life had these aggregates, and now I've inherited them. But then why does all this other weird stuff happen? And I think what it is it's an unrefined aggregate that has some other things kind of dangling from it that didn't quite manifest in your life, but it had to come out somehow. It's kind of like how am I trying to think of this? Okay, for me, I've always felt a strong, powerful connection to Beethoven, his life, his music. I love all things Beethoven.
Right.
Like, growing up, I just was obsessed with Beethoven for no reason whatsoever. And now that I'm an adult, I realized this as I was trying to make the audio rosaries. Here I am trying to compose music, and I can barely hear. Part of the reason I was having trouble was because I have really powerful tinnitus in my ears. It's very loud sometimes. It causes headaches at times.
Oh, my.
But that was my aggregate structure that I had in common with Beethoven. It manifested differently because I'm a different person.
Yeah.
But I have that losing the hearing and making music anyway aggregate structure. And so what I think may have happened with the girl in the painting after you'd met her and everything. It was like there were all these aggregates for a story that could have happened, but the story did not follow through because there were other circumstances that prevented it from manifesting fully in your life. So those other things had to come out somehow, so they came through, like the psychic lady.
It makes a lot of sense what you're saying, because there's a part of the story that I actually neglected to tell, not intentionally. I legitimately forgot this important part of it. But for those that might be a little bit uncertain as to what we're talking about, a few episodes back, I don't remember which one it was, but we talked about a dream I had, and we spent the last hour of the show talking about this strange dream that sort of resulted in this bizarre series of events, meeting certain people, and none of it ever came together in a way that made sense. It's just, it happened, but it didn't seem to have any real purpose behind it. So what Joy's talking about is that story, and trying to come back with maybe a viable explanation for why it occurred. And I think you're onto something, Joy, because one part I forgot to tell. If you recall from the story, I went to the Salvador Dali Museum in St. Petersburg, and I felt compelled to go. And so I kept begging my parents. It's like, let's go out there, let's go drive out there. We were living in Orlando at the time, so it's not that far of a drive to get to St. Petersburg. It's still Central Florida. And so they're like, okay, we'll go. And it's like, no, we got to go. So we just planned a date randomly and went. And we had no idea that when we got there, there were all these flowers, all over the place. Let me see if I can even find the exact date. Let me see here. Yeah. Okay. So basically, I can even tell you the date, and I'll tell you why I could find the date. It was January 23rd, 1989. And the reason I know the date is that when we went to the Salvador Dali Museum to look for this painting to see if they might have had nostalgic echo in their collection, because it is the largest collection of Dalis anywhere in the world, he died that day.
Oh.
January 23rd, 1989 is when Salvador Dali died.
I remember you telling me that story.
We went to the museum the very day he died.
Yeah.
It was shocking. And that definitely seems to connect again to what you're talking about. Like there's some remaining aggregate that isn't manifesting correctly or the way it was intended, and it sort of produced this weird shit.
and I think, yeah, exactly. And I think what it is, when we tap into that past life thing, we're tapping into our aggregate structures and what they may have manifested as before they got to us.
Yes.
And so when we start seeing these aggregate structures manifesting again and playing out in our lives, we feel like we're doomed to stop it. We can't stop whatever it is that's happening. We're doomed to repeat whatever. And the thing is, it really does manifest differently with each life. And you handle it differently because, if you're looking at the multiverse, you handle it differently across the multiverse even, but you're having a completely different manifestation than the person who had it before you.
Yes. Because it's truly a different person.
There's going to be stuff that doesn't line up.
Yes.
Yeah, there's going to be stuff that doesn't line up, and so that's where I think that may have come from, that there was this person that, in some other life you were supposed to marry her and save her, and maybe that did happen and she still died anyway. But in this world, that wasn't the direction you were supposed to go, but you still had this aggregate structure that had to play out. And so for those little bits and pieces that didn't actually happen, they had to come in story form.
That makes very good sense. And I think it's on the nail, to be honest. I mean, I know it's probably a little bit too esoteric for some people, and you're coming at it because we've been doing esoteric mysticism together for like 5 years now. So, the dialogue and the semantics are clear. I'm sure it's like, what is she talking about?
Yeah, there's probably a few head scratchers going.
Yeah, but what we're talking about, I guess let's maybe qualify it a little bit for people that might not be familiar with things like aggregate structures. Aggregate structure is a term that I utilize in esoteric mysticism, which is a webinar that I teach that Joy is a part of. She's been a student from the beginning. So one of the few that have been with the class from day one and has attended, I think, almost all of the live classes. Maybe you might have missed one or two because you weren't feeling well, but not many. And so you've been there from the beginning. And so one of the terms that we use is aggregate structure, which is an extension of the Buddhist term of the 5 aggregates that make up phenomenal experience. And it is those aggregates that sort of manifest in a multitude of ways that make up an identity, a concept of self, which is also where we get in Buddhism the illusion of the soul. And the reason it's called the illusion of the soul is because in Buddhism, they follow what is known as the doctrine of anatta. Okay, and anatta is no soul. Literally translates to being no soul. Now that doesn't mean that there's no soul in the Western sense of when a Catholic talks about having a soul. That's a little bit of a different thing than what Hinduism refers to as a soul. A soul in the Eastern sense is more of a self, is a continuity of consciousness, a continuity of self, of identity. And in Buddhism, Buddhism recognizes that there is none of those things. They're all illusions that are being manifested out of these aggregates. And so when we say aggregate structure in esoteric mysticism, what we're talking about is the structure that makes up our concept of self and identity, which is basically the whole of our reality as we know it. So all of these things are existent conditions of vibrational energy that manifest certain phenomena that we make up to be the human experience, and they're sort of eternal in this, but not in the cohesion. The cohesion's not eternal, and so what makes up your formula, what makes up you to be, Joy Keeling and Bishop Bryan and Jamie Wolfe and everyone in the audience, is that particular recipe that is your aggregate self. And so your aggregates, the ones that make you up, all come together in different proportions. They have different type of archetypal associations and vibratory energy rates that produce the experience of the phenomenal world and thus make up who you think you are. The problem is, as soon as you die, that energy system just gets set free. And if there's nothing cohesive about it, which usually there isn't unless there's exceptional work done to make sure that it stays cohesive, then it just gets sort of reattached into other new people that are being born and through the process of what is typically known as reincarnation. So the real problem with reincarnation, as typically people see it in a theosophical New Age sense, is that they think that it's like you make a, you choose your lifetime, you choose your parents, you choose your struggles, and these are life experiences so that your soul can learn. That's completely an antithesis to what Buddhism teaches about reincarnation. Buddhism teaches that none of that is supposed to even happen in the first place. It's all being spawned out of attachment because those aggregates spend all of their life attaching to things and they don't know what else to do. So when they reform desperately into a new person, they're starting the process of attaching all over again, which perpetuates the cycle of pain and suffering that Buddhism hopes to eliminate through practicing a meditation and meditating on shunyata to be released from pain and suffering and no longer reincarnate. The goal of Buddhism is to never reincarnate. That's the actual goal. Buddhism is when you don't do it right. Reincarnation is when you don't do Buddhism right. And that's the thing that I think really blows people's mind in the West, because I think a lot of Western people that don't like, typical conventional Western religion, like Christianity, they're attracted to things like Buddhism because it's like, I can relate to that. They believe in reincarnation, but it's not the reincarnation you think it is. And so in esoteric mysticism, we take it a little bit further. So when Joy, you're talking about the aggregates, what she's talking about is that particular energy system that got stuck to me is perhaps something that is a residual energy that's still existent, that hasn't been fully resolved, but yet there was no way for it to manifest in this particular life the way it was supposed to or the way it intended to. So it's sort of like a shadow of what it was playing out in the only way that it could, which was in this impossible scenario that doesn't make really any sense. And if you listen to that, I'm not going to go through the dream again. It takes too long. You have to go back and listen to that episode if you're interested. But that's what she's talking about. And it makes good sense. And Joy, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I really think that you are right. I believe that that's exactly what happened. Yeah, I do.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It
really does from every perspective, because it's like, what we do is we're basically thought form creators, right? Even one could even argue that the human being is a thought form. It's just a very dense one. And so it has some sort of some semblance of tangibility to it, but it's really a thought form. And so when you really kind of think about, well, what do thought forms do? I mean, what do all things do? Well, everything just reproduces itself. I mean, that's kind of what existence is that something comes into being and then that thing spawns the same thing or something similar to itself into being, and it just keeps this perpetual cycle, and then it evolves over the course of that process. But when we think about reproduction, we're thinking about, typically only in sexual terms, but there's so much more to our ability to create than just generating a child. I mean, creating art, creating music, these are powerful spiritual creations too that do take on a life of their own. There is
especially
soul.
Music.
Oh, there's soul in those things. There's soul in art. There is soul in music.
Yeah.
You can feel it. If you ever heard a song that just hits you and it's like it takes you away and you can feel it deep within yourself. It's like you listen to it over and over again. But if you listen to it too much, it starts to fade. Have you ever had that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's like I want to crawl up inside the song and live in it for a while. Yeah.
Yes.
I'll listen to it on repeat for like hours or days even.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like that. And it's like there's certain frequencies that sort of resonate with our aggregates, and it connects us to these deeper spiritual realities. And that's because there's many songs that I have identified over the years. I wish I could play them on this show so that we could go and analyze it with the audience, but I don't have the rights to that music, and YouTube will absolutely shut that down quickly. So I can't share those pieces of music. I could do it for my students though. We can do it before class. Actually I can do it now. We can record it now, can't we? Because now we can just put it on our own server. Nobody can, delete it.
There's a plan.
Maybe I'll do that sometime, so that we'll take a break from creating our little oracle deck, and we can go through and analyze some of these pieces of music and see if anybody else in the class feels that resonance, because I do think there's something unique about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That'll remind me so much of like high school when we would get into groups and analyze like poetry or short prose, and we'd break it down into like symbolism and stuff. Yeah, that was.
Well, do you remember when we did
fun stuff? And I haven't been able to do that since I've been an adult, so I'm excited.
Yeah, well, we'll do a special class, and we'll just take a break from the deck for a week and do that, because that would be fun. And I really would like to, kind of as a little bit of a experiment, a little metaphysical experiment, and I like to do those, just to see if other students are picking up that resonant frequency that sort of just hits them that way, because some of the stuff you might not have ever heard. It's not, some of the music is obscure. It's not like we're listening to the top 10 here. It's just stuff that I've listened to or heard on a particular channel, and it's like, oh my God, I can hear that's connecting me. But some of it's in like the old classics. Like there's a piece in Beethoven. There's a part of Beethoven's Seventh Symphony in the first movement. There's a part where it plays the same note with three different instruments, and that does it. There's something about that particular moment that hits the frequency of these aggregates and sort of opens up a door inside my mind that allows me to experience something spiritual that I can't really put into words. There's no words for it.
That vibrational switch.
Yeah.
It is. It is. And I'd just like to see if my students, if there's students in the class that could also feel or experience it, because you guys would be more apt to do it since we've been, there's some kind of, I think, metaphysical resonance with our, with students to, all the students working together on the same goal kind of creates a certain frequency pattern that is similar. Kind of like when you have, the not so magical phenomenon of a woman's dormitory where all the women living together have their periods on the same week.
Exactly.
Yeah. It creates, there's resonance. I mean,
that's a real thing.
It's a real
happened
thing
in the military too.
Yeah, it does. It
It
really
is.
does.
I went to a women's college. I know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's well known.
Basic training by week 4, everybody was like in sync with each other. It was crazy.
But think of how wild that is. I mean,
think about the poor male drill sergeants that had to put up with this.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm sure, it's just, I think it's easy with women because, again, something tangible happens that can be easily experienced. But, I think it happens with all of us. I think it happens with men too. It's just, we don't have something that is as easily apparent as menstruation, but it's something that I think is very much related. I mean, some of it's probably pheromones. Some of it probably has something to do with pheromones that we are still connected to.
Right.
But I think a lot of it also, though, is residual, is frequency, and that when you spend time together as a group, you start to create a group frequency. And that resonance is the same across all people, which is good, because one thing you can learn about this is that, if you want to, if you want to change something about your life, then the best thing you can do is spend time with people that are doing the thing that you want to change, that's something that you want to become. So it's like, if you're like, let's say you're interested in becoming a doctor, but you don't have any knowledge or no means in order to get there. Maybe you're not, you don't have a rich dad that can put you through medical school or something, and the school loans are too much. Just by hanging out, getting yourself, connected in the medical field in some capacity, even if it's through volunteerism or, some kind of a mentor program or whatever, just being around that energy will slowly change the frequency so that it becomes more possible, and that those opportunities start to open up in ways that you might not have even been known possible, because it's an energy exchange. And it's also likewise why it's very dangerous to hang out with very negative people. So my first thing is, if there's negative people in your life, get them the hell out of your life. There's no sin in that, and there's no problem with that. Negative people will destroy you. Positive people will build you up. It's an absolute fact, and it's all based on this like attracts like. Don't believe in the opposites attract crap.
No.
Temporary at best.
It's temporary at best. It might be enticing. I think what really happens with opposites attract is, I think it's just enticement. It's the forbidden fruit. It's something unique and unfamiliar, and that can excite some people. But if you're looking for long-term, sophisticated improvement, then you follow the occult
Your
law.
energy's got to be compatible.
It does. It has to be on some level. Otherwise, you're just going to make each other miserable. And that's not even just about relationships. That's, or like intimate relationships. It's about any relationship, even student to teacher.
I've had all kinds of friends. Where when it was starting to fall apart, I would just let it, because it's time. It's time for it to go. We're no longer compatible. Be free and find your new people, and I'll go find mine.
And that is smart.
I've always dealt with it.
That is smart. And a lot of people might not understand that, but I think a lot of the problems that people have in life, like what you see with this, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard thing, there's a lot of craziness in that situation. But I think if I were to sit down with both of them, not that I would want to, but if I were to sit down with both of them and try to really help them to understand what's going on there, I think ultimately what it comes down to is incompatible energy systems. You can't hold on to
Your vibe
that.
attracts your tribe.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And when you try to fight that rhythm, you end up hurting yourself, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's all part of the aggregate. So all this to say that this is how important understanding aggregate structures are, because they do more than just create identities. They do more than just reincarnate into people. They do more than just, determining how you will behave. It also has to do with your energy frequency and the kind of life that you live, and why some people seem remarkably lucky without even trying, and other people try really hard and never get anywhere. All of this aggregates. Yep. And you can change them.
And it's why you get along with some people and don't get along with others.
Sometimes instantaneously.
If you're not getting along with a group of people, get rid of the group of people. Go find your other people. There's people you will get along with. You know, this is not the spot you need to be in right now. Find the spot you do need to be in.
And it doesn't even matter if it's
people
family.
People don't pay attention to the energy around them.
They don't.
Yeah,
they don't.
Exactly. They're not mindful of, they just think, oh, well, how do I fix this? How do I put it all back together? And it's like, you're no longer compatible. Stop trying to put it together when it's already.
Yeah, sometimes the pieces just don't fit together, and you just need to put the box away.
You do. I mean, it's sad.
And oftentimes, when you leave a situation like that, oftentimes you immediately go right into what you were looking for to begin with.
That's true.
Like. You might think, well, gosh, why don't I have the right kind of people around me? And then you get rid of the people, and then suddenly, poof, the right people show up. I had some toxic friends that were, I would hang out with them a lot, and then they cut off our friendship, and I was like, okay. And that was the end of that. And less than a month later, you appeared in my life, Bishop.
Really?
You were on TV, but you weren't in my life directly, but you were on TV, and I was like, well, I don't have to pay attention to him, but I did. I was actually not planning on following you, but after a couple of times, I was like, you know what? This is the field that I'm going to be getting into anyway. I should align myself with him and just find out, what he goes through, and it was the whole thing of trying to find people who are in the field that you want to get into, and surrounding yourself with that. And poof, I've done that.
And you never know where it's going to lead, because it can always keep developing, and the energy frequency is always operating even when you're not aware of it. So there's a lot of good that could come if this is truly something that you wanted for your life. Yes, I guarantee you the 5 years you spent in esoteric mysticism is setting up a stage for you to have more opportunity and pursuing those kinds of interests. Now, the downside is there's a lot of weird shit in esoteric mysticism too. So, so you take the good with the bad.
Go with the rest of my life.
Well, there you go. As long as you're prepared for it, then you're safe. We are talking about any kinds of things that are on your mind, because it is Open Lines, Open Topics, and we're at the top of the second hour here. We'll be back after this for one last hour. Call into the show. Okay, the number's on the screen. We'd love to hear from you.
The seasons come and go like thoughts of you. Like a wave returns to the sea into the blue. They change but in a cycle that I can't lose. Each painful but delightful to live through. You came into my life just like another season. Not for long, just a time, just like another season. Maybe this time next year you'll reappear for no reason. But I'll cherish every day until you come my way this season. This season. Just like another season. Not for long, just a time. Just like another season. Maybe this time next year you'll reappear for no reason. But I'll cherish every day until you come my way this season. Changing all over again. Yeah, we will keep on changing, just like another season.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. It's been open lines, open topics all night, and we've been having a fantastic time so far. Many thanks to Joy Keeling for tuning in and calling in to the show. She always has great things to talk about and contribute to the discussion. She used to be the co-host of this show when it first started, and so it's nice that she's still a part of it in a big way when she calls in. And that was a really, really brilliant insight into that story about that dream I had. Definitely worth thinking about. Anyway, we're still taking your calls, so make sure you call into the show, 347-514-7150. Enter PIN number 3768923 to get into the queue. We'll also take more questions from the chat when we return. Don't go away. Well, I don't think Father Chris will be joining us. It seems that he might have forgotten about tonight's show. I'm not sure. We haven't, been too much in touch, and unless you are following the Nicolayan Network schedule, it can sometimes be forgotten. And when you're doing irregular specials like this, it's possible. But we'll try to connect with him for the next show, at least, so that he can be there. And we haven't really decided on what that topic's going to be yet for next month. I don't even have a date for next month yet. We're still kind of feeling things out with all of the changes that we're doing. And of course, that can sometimes trip us up. So bear with us if there's going to be like schedule changes or last minute changes. It can sometimes happen, which is why I don't want to do anything too regular right now. Okay, well, let's get back into the subject tonight. Jamie, did you see any other questions while we were talking?
So this is one that I don't think we've dealt with, and honestly, I don't know too much about it. I've heard a few things about it. Question from Tiffany. What are your thoughts about the conspiracy of the random staircases in the middle of the woods? Have you heard of this phenomenon?
Not with much knowledge. I mean, I've heard that there was something like that going on, but I couldn't tell you more about it than just saying that I think I heard something about somebody saying that there was like some staircases. There are random steps that lead to nowhere, just randomly placed in the middle of the woods, and they found them in several countries, usually in like a national park. It could be wood, cement, some of them are iron. They've debunked a lot of it as, just former structures that have collapsed, and the staircase is usually the last to go. It's usually the staircase in the chimney. Yeah, it does seem
but I
to
guess
be.
There's some phenomenon also about it that you're never, maybe it's an old wives' tale. You're not supposed to climb to the top.
Well, I don't,
because I guess it can open a portal.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far with it. There's a lot of strange things that tend to happen. Now, if we want to if we want to be practical and pragmatic about this, I think that certainly, even driving around Atlanta, you will sometimes drive by and see this chimney in the middle of nothing. Clearly it was a house there at one time.
Right.
The rest of the structure has fallen away, but the chimney is more enduring. So it's there. I think stairs, like you said, definitely fall into that category. And I would say probably the greater number of these is probably explained through that. But if it could ever be found that something like that was present and there was confirmed to be no structure ever there at any point in history, then that's a little bit more interesting, although I don't know enough about it to say that there's anything that has been confirmed.
I don't either. I'm going to have to
look into it. Yeah.
On it.
Now, let's say esoterically that something is going on, and what would explain some of these weird things that do happen? And this is where I get into, and I wish Father Chris was here because he gets he gets interesting when we talk about this in particular, because it is very contrary to the Christian worldview. And I like when he comes in and sort of, becomes a devil's advocate for the other side. But I do struggle sometimes. And I mean, anybody who knows me knows that I struggle with this, that there are certain things as an observer that I have noticed, when I take myself outside of the paradigm and I allow myself to think outside of the Christian box and don't adhere too closely to the theology, just so that I can freely explore and without any kind of bias attached, just look at the data and say, what is it showing me? There is remarkable evidence when you look at it from a, I guess, quantum mechanics perspective, a theoretical physics perspective, that so much of reality seems to mimic a procedurally generated simulation. So much so that some top minds of our time have suggested that there's a better than 50-50 chance that we're actually living in a simulation right now. And that all of this is actually procedurally generated in some kind of very advanced virtual reality computer system. And so it has left me to wonder, not that I'm saying that I absolutely believe this, but it's left me to wonder that if these theories are true, that it could explain some of the weird things that happen. Like there's glitches. Do you remember the movie The Matrix? Okay. That's the first movie that really kind of dealt with this.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone, I mean, if you're a philosophy, buff like I am, then The Matrix is kind of something that you need to watch. And because I was always amazed that even before I saw it, there were so many things that were covered in that I used to think about that I never realized that, oh my God, they made a movie about some of this stuff. But, there was, if you remember when they would change something in the Matrix, it would create a glitch where the same thing would be repeated a couple times. Like the black cat that they encounter when they're running through that building, and then they look and then the cat's doing the same thing again. And anytime there's like a deja vu experience, they call it, it's because something in the Matrix was changed. One of the things that I think applies to this is the idea that particles, certain quantum level particles can either take the form of a particle or a wave, depending upon whether or not there's an observer. Which is a lot like procedural generation. Like I've talked about this in the past, that, there are video games where they're huge, they're massive. One of my favorite games, I've played it on YouTube a few times. Sometimes people from the Nickelodeon Network will come on my adventures with me. When I'm bored, I'll just I'll do a stream of my flying in my spaceship on No Man's Sky. It's one of my favorite games right now. I think it's even far exceeded other games I've played in the past. I've been spending a lot of time with it because I find it relaxing, and it's in VR completely. And it's a complete procedurally generated universe, over 250 galaxies that you can travel to, with billions upon billions upon billions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of star systems that you can visit, with even like quintillion planets. I mean, it's crazy how big this is. The planets are almost the size of the real ones. It's just, it's insane. The size of this game is insane. And the reason it's able to exist in the way that it does and not like completely take up all of the computers in the world and then some, is because it only renders what the observer is experiencing. So if there's nobody experiencing that part of the universe, the game doesn't render it. It saves on resources this way. And it looks like when you look at quantum mechanics, it looks like, well, reality does that. So why would it have to? Why would, if this is real, organically real, why would it have to conserve energy the way that a computer program conserves resources? Doesn't seem to make sense, other than the fact that, well, maybe that it is just a simulation, and could explain why there's weird phenomena like stairways just, you know, in the middle of nowhere and no reason for it, or things just sort of happen. Or, I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced the Mandela effect. Sorry, the Mandela effect. You know, the Bernstein Bears, right? Bernstein Bears. I always call them the Bernstein Bears. That they are, you know, people have different memories as to how that word is spelled. It's called the Mandela effect because it was first recognized as a phenomenon when there were large numbers of people remembering that Nelson Mandela had died in prison instead of ever being released, even though he was released, right?
I remember that.
Yeah. And there are people that remember him dying, like large numbers of people remembering that he died, a completely different outcome, which is strange. You know, why would so many people remember the wrong version of history if everybody experienced the same, you know, event? And so there's all these different things. It's like another one is the Cinderella mirror on the wall, right? That's how people tend to remember it when
who's the fairest of them all.
Yes. But she doesn't say mirror on the wall, but we all remember that. But that's not what she says. I
remember it.
Yeah. But that's not what she says. She actually says, I think it's just mirror on the wall. You know, Tracy, if you're out there, Tracy, do you remember what in the chat room? Do you remember exactly what the correct phrase is? Because we all remember mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all? And that's not what the evil witch says. It's not Cinderella. No, it's Snow White, right?
Snow White.
Is it Snow White that has the witch
Snow
with the mirror?
White, the poisoned apple that.
Yes, it's Snow White.
Takes away the witch's youth or whatever.
Yeah. So I'm messing it up, and I guess that shows you how memory can be altered. But it's strange when a large number remember the same exact thing, and it's absolutely incorrect. So you look it up. It's called the Mandela effect. There's all these examples that you can find online and see which ones, you know, that you remember might actually be the ones that are wrong. But you know, this is something that I think might explain some of this strange paranormal phenomenon that we don't completely understand at our current state of understanding. Marina says she thinks it's mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest one of all? Oh, magic mirror. Yes, magic mirror on the wall. That's what she says. That's the one. Thank you, Marina. Thank you.
That's not how I remember it.
No, we all remember mirror on the wall,
Right.
but she actually says magic mirror on the wall. And people are usually shocked with that one. So, you know, these are the things that lead us to wonder, or lead me at least to wonder, whether or not reality is what we think it is. Could it explain why we're able to manifest things with thought? That we can sort of change the fabric of reality by, you know, having the right kinds of intentions. And maybe this is how divination and magic work, because what would divination be doing other than just breaking down the code of the matrix and showing you what's coming next? Mm-hmm. So that would mean fortune telling would work if you could break down what the patterns are that show you, well, these are the results from these patterns. So it could explain things like tarot cards. It could explain things like astrology. But it also can explain things like witchcraft and magic, because that could be literally messing with the code of reality and changing it so that the code works a certain way and produces a different effect. You know, there's also conspiracy theories about CERN. You and I, Jamie, have talked about these.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it's like...
Them jokers opened up a black hole on us.
Well, I mean, it's strange that, you know, you have CERN starting these high-level experiments, you know, and then, you know, this weirdness that is COVID-19 happens, and the world seems to go in this weird direction with Donald Trump as president.
Upside down.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, let's face it. And whether you love Donald Trump or you hate Donald Trump, and I honestly can understand, you know, I can understand why people like him. I can understand why people hate him. I get it. But, I don't think regardless of where you stand on the Donald Trump meter, I don't think you can deny that was one of the weirdest ass presidencies that this country's ever seen. And, it was a weird presidency, and it was a strange aura that came out of it, and I don't think life has felt the same since, to be honest. And the weirdness of COVID-19 was really a precursor to the strangeness that happened around the time that Trump became president, which is kind of a weird event when you think about it, and around the time that CERN was doing this stuff. Add to that the supposed predictions that shows like The Simpsons have made that look
That's
like
creepy.
It is creepy. Because, I mean, there was an episode like 10 years ago with Trump running for president. And then they even have pictures of him, and he's doing the same thing that he did in the Simpsons show. I mean, it was almost like as if it was a complete copy going down the escalator, if you've seen it. Now, I don't know if that's been doctored in some way. It's possible. I mean, I don't take them seriously enough to actually research them to any extent, but I do pay attention, and it makes me think. I mean, it's just philosophical speculation. One might even call it, philosophical diarrhea. I mean, it's just kind of like you're just kind of sitting there, and then all of a sudden it happens, and now you spew forth all these ideas, and it doesn't mean anything, and it just means that you're thinking. But I mean, I'm not, unlike, because I know what Father Chris would say, he would believe in reality, right? I mean, he would hold firm that reality, creation is real, but I can't completely adopt that as a philosopher. I can totally adopt it as a Christian. I don't have a problem doing that as a Christian, but as a philosopher, yeah, I struggle with it, because every philosopher struggles with the idea of what is real, right? What is reality? And there's all sorts of different definitions that apply, not the least of which is what you can tangibly see, because you can't even depend upon that. I mean, the more you study the nature of the universe, the more bizarre it gets. And I find the microcosmos is as bizarre as the macrocosmos. So, we don't even really understand what the universe is. We can't move away from it far enough to actually see what it is or what it's doing. We're stuck so much into it that we really don't know what it is. But the same is kind of true of the microscopic world, the quantum realm. I think movies like Ant-Man do a great job exploring that, because it's like, what really is going down there? What happens if you could go smaller than an atom? What happens if you go down to the quarks and the, subatomic particles, and what exists there, and what is reality at that level? And does reality mean anything anymore? Does reality mean the same thing? And, not talking metaphysically or speculatively or philosophically, quantum mechanics has proven that at the quantum level, reality does not play by the same rules that it does at the level that we're at the size we're at the mass that we know to be the common experience that we know as human beings.
Well, I find it interesting. I've shared, I think, an article on the network, and I can't remember where it was from, some scientific magazine, where they've got an updated photo of what the inside of a cell looks like.
Yes, I saw that.
And it looks like the cosmos. And
yes.
It's the most advanced magnification of I believe it was a human cell.
Yes.
And it looks like you're taking a picture of the cosmos. And
yes.
I found that very fitting because of some talks you had in class many moons ago.
Yes,
about your experience.
One of my meditations that I guess we need to go into that at some point. But I agree with you. It is reminiscent of that, and the complexity is astounding, and it makes you wonder. What is reality at that level? And that's just the cellular level. I mean, that's a level that we can see with microscopes, but I mean, you can't see quarks, you can't see God particles, for example. Right. I mean, we don't know.
It's kind of like looking through a kaleidoscope where the more you twist it, it changes, but it's still organized.
Yes, it's organized in some weird kind of random way.
Fascinating when I saw that.
It is. It is truly a fascinating thing. Calling in from Canada on the Skype line. Hello, Marina. You're on the air.
Hey, Marina.
Hi, Bishop Bryan. Hi, Jeannie. How are you?
We're
Hello,
doing
how are
well.
you?
How about you? Haven't talked in a
I'm doing-
while.
Yes, it's been a while. Thank you so much for making it special.
Yeah, we'll do these, probably once a month until we come back on the regular schedule.
That's wonderful. So I have a question on the topic of aggregates that you've been covering.
Yeah.
So there are some people, who have sometimes more darker aggregates. There's some people who, like I know people who cannot sit through a horror movie, for example.
Yes.
And then there's sometimes others who are really fascinated by some like darker themes, whether it's like in literature, music. I was wondering if that is something when you have like darker aggregates, is that something that you should work on like eliminating? And of course, like a fixation is not a good thing, but if you have like a darker aggregates, I'm curious to know, like, is that something you have to eliminate or what do you do with that?
Well, it's a good question because, sometimes it can be a little bit of a paradoxical journey, spiritual development is, because there's absolutely a need to be as authentic as possible, which means being true to yourself, which means accepting yourself for the way that you are. And that's hard for a lot of people because we're so busy changing other people because we don't like the way other people are. Or we get into a relationship and we're like, well, I like these things about them, but there's this one other thing or these other things, and I'll marry them and can change them, and that never works because people need to be authentic. And, I'm the first one to say, part of my nature is authenticity, which means I'm not going to follow the perfect paradigm of what a bishop should be, or I'm not going to meet your expectation and say, this is what a Christian is. I don't care if you see me as the pinnacle of Christian example or if I'm the worst Christian example, because I'm just being authentic. I'm being true to who I am. Now, there are limits, though, to how that authenticity should work, because there are absolutely unwholesome or dysfunctional behaviors or energy systems that are to be avoided. Now, in religion, we obviously call those things demonic or satanic or evil, and rightfully so. Those things do exist and are truly what they are, labeled to be. Evil is a real thing, and it is something to be avoided. And our authenticity should reflect what we are created to be, which in the metaphysical stream of things is to be an emulation of creation, which means that evil would be the direct antithesis of creation, and that would be destruction or destructive tendencies, which a lot of behaviors are, and a lot of these dark things you're talking about are destructive things, and that's not authentic. Even though if it feels authentic, it's still not authentic because it isn't an emulation of our creative nature. It is a destructive aspect that is completely unlike us, which falls into the realm of where demons and things of that nature manifest, because those are expressions or thought forms of destructive energy cycles. So we want to obviously avoid that. Now, a human being has the unfortunate result of being now, because of how religion defines it as fallen nature, and now has us established as being accessible to both streams of energy. So we can follow after our creative nature and try to align ourselves more closely with God, or we can make destructive choices and align ourselves more closely with the realm of the demonic, and that tends to lead to sickness and spiritual disease and all sorts of problems where I have to come in as an exorcism fix. That's, again, not living authentically, even though if it feels right, because there are people that do more easily resonate with these darker frequencies. And that's because their aggregate structure does indeed contain elements that are dysfunctional. And that's the fallen nature. That's how we make mistakes. Now, we all have it. I mean, otherwise we'd be perfect people. So perhaps in this model, the Virgin Mary is really the only person other than Jesus Christ himself that we had to have a perfect aggregate structure because they don't have they did not have these dark tendencies clearly, or if they did, which is, I guess, possible, particularly even more so in the Virgin Mary's case, because, you know, she's not half God, or she's not fully God even. I mean, you know, she was a human being just like us, born by two mortal parents. She wasn't the product of a virgin birth. You know, she didn't have a dual nature like Jesus did. So she was fully human, which means that she participated in all of the same deficits of humanity that we do, yet made the right decisions every time. So somehow she was able to do that. It could be grace. The grace could be the right aggregate structure that makes it possible. I mean, that's something that could go, you know, we could speculate about forever. But the reality is most of us are not perfect. All of us are not perfect. And that lack of perfection comes from these darker aggregates. Okay, that's where it comes from. We get parts that are very functional and are perfect expressions of what they were intended to be, sort of like a fracture in a beautiful stained glass. So think of human beings when we were created before the fall. Think of us as like a perfect stained glass piece of art, and the fall being shattered fractures of those pieces. So some of it's on the ground, some of it you can't even make out what it was anymore because it's just too broken, but parts of it are still intact. And so if you look at that and you kind of compare an aggregate structure to a broken stained glass window, you might be able to, in some people, see the art and say, well, I know what that is. That's a depiction of the crucifixion, or that's a depiction of St. Michael the Archangel. But some windows might be so broken that you can't even make out what it was or who it was. Maybe you could tell it was like the leg of someone, so maybe it was an angel or something, but you don't know which saint it might have been, because it's just too broken. And there are people that are that broken, and so their pieces that are fractured or damaged are where these dark tendencies tend to come from. Because what happens is, if the aggregate structure is not being filled by something wholesome, then the nature abhors a vacuum, metaphysically as well as in actual tangible science. So whether or not you're talking about the realm of the five senses and physical space, or if you're talking about metaphysical reality, nature still abhors a vacuum in either condition. Which means that if an aggregate becomes emptied in some way, it needs to be filled with a new resident energy stream, which we call archetypes. And some of those archetypes are very negative and very dark, and very inauthentic. They're not true to the person, but they've adopted them into themselves. And over time, it feels familiar and it feels natural because they've gotten used to them. But this is actually the seduction of demonic attachment. This is how it happens. Because what the real metaphysics of it is that a person's aggregate structure is so damaged that it's not able to hold the proper archetypes anymore. And so these darker ones come in, and artificial ones come in and replace it. And that becomes possession.
And sometimes in clients, there's some people who... because I've done some counseling in the past, there are some people who really are so stuck, but actually don't want to move on.
Yes.
They like their brokenness.
They do.
It's their new identity, and there's no way to convince them out of it.
Well, it becomes a type of seduction because, again, we tend to attach to anything. And even if it's not good for us, we still will attach to it, which is why alcoholism is the thing. There's nothing wrong with a drink, but if you're drinking a bottle a day, that's going to catch up with you eventually. You can't keep doing that. And particularly if you become, a mean drunk or something, that's even more problematic because now you're being abusive. You're affecting other people. These are things that are the result of people attaching to anything that is comfortable, and by proxy, anything that's comfortable is usually familiar. So if it's alcoholism, it's because there's something familiar about that feeling that they want to return to. Maybe it's just being carefree. Maybe it's being able to forget something. Maybe it's just the fact that it relaxes them to the point that they don't have to be on guard, but they're attached to that feeling. And that's where the problem is. So again, it all comes back to attachment. The only disease humanity really has is the disease of attachment. And we tend to attach to those things that are familiar, even when they're not good for us. And so, yeah, if you live a life of negativity and darkness and you get attached to them, you got attached to them because they started to become so familiar that you can't even imagine life without them. And you would actually feel genuine loss to be without them. This is how bad relationships continue.
It's easy to go where you've already been. Alcoholism, drug abuse, even domestic violence. That cycle just continues because it becomes a familiarity. It becomes almost a comfort. You expect it. It's too hard to try something else.
Well, how many times do you see spouses?
It's so hard to get people out of those messes. They've really got to dig in deep, and only they can save themselves.
Exactly.
Ultimately.
I mean, how often do you see a person in a domestic violence situation that absolutely refuses to leave?
Over again.
It's like, why don't you leave? Because the thought of the fear of the unfamiliar is worse than being familiar with the abuse.
Right, because a lot of times their abuser's the breadwinner.
Yes.
And it leaves a lot of unknowns if you leave the relationship. If you have kids, what are you going to do with the kids? How am I going to make ends meet? How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to feed my kids? So they stay in it just so they can feel more comfortable about the other issues that come up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question, Marina. I hope we were able to cover that in a way that makes sense. So, yeah, I would say that you absolutely can. There are people that do collect. They're not negative aggregates as much as they are aggregates that are filled with negative archetypes, because the aggregates are like containers. Think of the aggregates as the physical container, and they become animated by the archetypes that fill those containers. And so we're made up of billions and billions of these little containers, and each container is supposed to be filled with an authentic archetypal pattern that matches our pattern of creation. But because we're fractured people due to what Christianity calls the fall, some of those aggregates are damaged and don't hold the original archetypes, or have a hard time holding on to those original archetypes. So then that's when these artificial ones come in and take their place.
Oh yes, that makes sense. I kind of think of when St. Paul says it is I who no longer live, but Christ lives in me.
Yes.
So it's kind of like he's still St. Paul. He still has a personality, but he's been filled with something different, which would be Christ.
Well, that's why Jesus' entire ministry is built upon the theme of healing. It's why his greatest miracles dealt with healing. What is so important about healing? What's so important about, curing blindness or leprosy? They are archetypes of being whole or being made whole. Because what we ultimately suffer from, the fall of man, is sickness. Sin is sickness. It's a type of spiritual illness.
Spiritual sickness.
Yeah. And we must be fixed from that.
The church is a hospital. Yeah.
Yeah. And the church it is a hospital. And that's why it's unrealistic for people to be like, I don't like going to church. There's only assholes there. Well, of course there's only assholes there.
Be the hospital.
Well, it is. Yeah, literally it was. You're right. Because it was an actual thing, but it's like, I laugh when people say, I don't like going to church because, everybody there's an asshole. And it's like, well, what do you expect? Of course, it's a place for sick people. I mean, yeah, of course you're going to go see the assholes there. You got to, you want to see the healthy people. You're going to wait to have to go to heaven for that, because the healthy people aren't there.
Yeah, we're all assholes, buddy. It's just a matter of how much and what kind of asshole.
It is. It's how much of your aggregates it determines whether or not you're a real asshole, or if you're, just a little one, is basically how broken is your aggregate structure? How much work have you done to repair it? And the more whole you become, the less of an asshole you tend to be.
Keeping it real.
Yeah, keeping it real. Oh my goodness.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good question there, Marina. Thank you so much.
Good talking with you, Marina.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
It's great to speak with you again. Take care.
Yeah, definitely.
Take
You
care,
too. Call in anytime. Oh, yeah. That's
so, Bishop,
great.
we got one by Art Dell. I think it's pretty good. Miss
Okay.
Cecilia, I'm sorry I missed yours. It scrolled off of the chat, so I can't go back to it.
Okay.
Hopefully, we can get to you soon. But Art Dell had one. He says, Bishop, I listened to one of your episodes on Vestiges of Christianity. On the subject of soul, you mentioned that we don't have an individual soul, but souls have us, and also mention a soul family. Is the soul an entity or energy? Is the soul what gives us our individual identity and character?
Yes and no. Because the soul, this is where it gets complicated when trying to be a syncretic with Eastern religion and trying to make Eastern religion work and Eastern metaphysics work with the Abrahamic religions, because Abrahamic religions are very much bent on the concept of there being one life, right? You have the one lifetime. This is your only chance. Better make it a good one.
Yeah.
Heaven or hell, or, paradise or non-existence or something, but not necessarily, this reincarnation or karmic, living out karma or whatever. And so how do you reconcile those things? Well, one of the ways you do that is by understanding the semantics, and arguably so, the semantics that we use in religion they're not too good, because they tend to be broken down by vernacular. I guess you could say the vernacular sort of degrades their usefulness. So now you have people using words like soul and spirit interchangeably, and virtually no one you talk to can come up with a standardized definition that one is the other. I've tried to change that, but only people who listen to me are going to actually probably use it. So it's not really enough of an impact what I'm doing to even change that. But I try to, at least in our circles, keep it consistent. So when we're talking about soul, I don't have I wouldn't say there's even a difference between the understanding in the East and what we would see in the West, outside of the fact that what the East calls a soul is more of an identity, and what the West calls a soul thinks it's an identity, and it's really not. And so it is true that Buddhism, when it says there is no soul, is being accurate. There is no soul. And that's because what actually is the true soul is what in Buddhism they would refer to as the alaya. But it's the thing that animates us, that thing that divine spark, that sort of.
I was just about to say that.
There you go. See, that is really the essence of what connects us. So, that spiritual connection that we sort of innately feel, but we're sort of removed from, and religion helps if we use it effectively. That helps to reconnect us, and we can have a more meaningful experience with it. Now, what is interesting about that is that is the quality that makes us made in the image of God. So when the Bible says we're made in the image of God, it's that divine spark that sort of is that divine nature living within us. Now, that's the kind of the temple of the Holy Spirit notion that we have in Christianity. The idea that the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit is supposed to live within us. And so by sacramental invitation through baptism and confirmation and the reception of Eucharist, we more closely fill ourselves with that divine connection, which is genuinely the soul. But this is the caveat. That is God. It's not us. So we have no claim to it whatsoever. So it's a misnomer. Again, this is the problem of semantics, but it's a misnomer to say, my soul. I sold my soul to the devil. You can't, because it's not yours, and you don't even have one to give. The soul that animates you has you, but it doesn't sell itself to the devil. You just deceive yourself into thinking that you can do things that don't really exist. So, that's kind of the problem. Now, souls absolutely do have people, because that is the divine energy that animates all things. St. Thomas Aquinas used to say in his metaphysics that if God were to abandon any object, whether it be a person, place, or thing, that object would cease to
Cease
exist.
to exist.
That because God, the presence of God is what makes it exist. If God removes his presence, there's no existence there anymore. That's the soul. Okay, so the very fact that you're animated, you're self-aware, you have a spiritual connection, and you have the capacity for salvation, that's all God. That's not you. None of that is you. So the thing that the problem is that we're so integrated with this spiritual connection, because that's kind of how salvation works, that we've taken possession of it, because that's kind of the way the ego is. It wants to possess things, and it does that through attachment. So it even attaches to the soul. It even says, this is mine. This belongs to me. This was given to me. I'm special. God made me unique. Bullshit. That's all bullshit. That's completely the wrong way to look at this. That doesn't mean you're any less important to God's plan. No, you're absolutely fundamentally important, to the point that something as powerful as God that loves you and you don't deserve it, and he still does, shows just how important that is. But to create an ego reality out of it is completely missing the point by trying to feel like you're special because you have this thing. No, it's not. Your identity is all a fabrication in your mind, and your mind rots away. Okay, that passes into the dust, ashes to ashes, right? Dust to dust. Well, that's the fundamentals of how we start Lent with Ash Wednesday. It's why we do that, to remind ourselves what we really are, because that's all we are. We're not the soul. Now, that being said, Christianity has this little unique trick that other religions don't have, and that is the resurrection of the dead, which is something special that occurs. And this is what makes Christianity so special, okay, is that the divine created this system that we now can participate as fully in the divine life as Jesus does. And so by virtue of his resurrection, we now are eligible as creatures of creation, because of our soul connection, to rise too. So yes, is it true that Buddhism says, there's no soul, so there's no self-identity, and when you die, you just basically become nothing? Absolutely true. Even the Jews, the ancient Jews, had a very similar thing with Sheol. Shinto has a very similar thing, similar condition, with this kind of abode of the dead where it's just sort of wasting away into sort of a nothingness. But the animation of the resurrection brings it all back. And that's the uniqueness of the Christian model that the other religions have failed to be able to truly understand. Because if you talk to a Buddhist about nirvana and ask them what it is, they can only tell you what nirvana is not. But they can't really tell you what nirvana is. And I'm talking about peri-nirvana. I'm not talking about just nirvana in a more philosophical sense that, we're really living in nirvana, but we don't know it. That's true, yes. But we're talking about what happens to a person that enters into enlightenment, has resolved all of their karma, and passes into peri-nirvana. No return from gone. It's the Buddhist mantra, gate gate paragate parasamgate buddhisoha, means gone beyond the beyond. Hail the Buddha and the lotus. And what that means is you reach a point where you transcend the need for existence. But Buddhists can't really tell you what that is or what that's like, or whether or not there's anything tangible to it. It sounds very ethereal, very esoteric, but it's kind of beyond comprehension. Now, in Christianity, it's the same thing. We come up with concepts of heaven, but they're not accurate. People think of heaven as like some kind of paradise, some kind of, place where you don't get sick, you don't get hungry, you don't die, everyone's happy and hanging around all the time. But that's not accurate. Heaven is this transcendent thing that they're talking about in this Buddhist. This is gone beyond the beyond. But because the connection that Jesus gives us, this God becoming man so that man can become God thing, fuses the two realities so that part of this becomes part of that one, and vice versa. This is what a soul is. A soul is that connection, but it is God's connection. It is not ours. We cannot possess it and we cannot control it. And so that's what I mean. Now, when we talk about soul families are groups of patterns of energy that animate multiple things. So it's like, you know, you've heard about soulmates, and you'll hear people say, oh, I fell in love and I found my soulmate. We're two parts of the same soul. And it comes from some Kabbalistic notion of, you know, souls being split from the males and the females, and they have to find each other again. It's a nice romantic notion, and it kind of tells a bit of a story, but it's not entirely accurate to the same sense that it needs to be. And that becomes, you know, a bit of an issue with understanding this. But really what it is soulmates can be multiple people. You can have multiple soulmates because you all share the same soul. The same animating soul that you have is in other people animating them too. And then you'll feel complete camaraderie with those people when you meet them. Okay. And that's because there are divisions, or I call them soul families, that have certain characteristics, and they animate those aggregate structures in that same way. It's a type of spiritual thing. And that's what that was about. But so does that answer the question, Jamie?
It answers it for me.
Okay.
What say you, Art?
Hopefully that answers the question for him.
Yeah. If you're still with us, Art, let me know in the chat, please.
Yeah.
I think you went above and beyond on that one.
Okay. I hope so, because it's complicated, and it's particularly complicated if you haven't gone through.
It's always a hard subject to talk about, because unless you're a esoteric student,
yes,
you know, it's easy for us to understand it, but for the layman, a lot of times it goes over their head. But our chat room's pretty advanced.
Well, they've hung out with us a long time. Some of them are students out there.
He says yes, thank you.
Okay,
so,
great.
Okay, appreciate the question, Art. Thanks.
And I love that question, and this is why I do these open lines, open topics, because you guys really come up with such great stuff. And I mean, honestly, I am so grateful for you, because it would be hard for me to sit here for 3 hours and talk about nothing. You know,
we got to talk about food, because that would stretch it out. But.
You started with those pineapples, you know.
Yeah, that's true. We started with pineapples on pizza. But no, that's a great explanation, because a lot of people, after they hear your explanation, are like, you know what? That makes sense. Yeah. I am attracted to certain people. I am attracted to this, that, and the other. And it just makes more sense the way you explain it.
Well, I try. I think it's about being clear and trying to, you know, make people understand with the right semantics. And I think the first step to that is creating a consistent vocabulary. It might not be the right one, but if it works for your model, and all you can do is create models. You can't create reality, because no one can know all of reality. So what you do is create a model based on reality, and then you defer from there. Religion started out doing that. Philosophy started out doing that, but unfortunately, it goes off on its own tangents.
Their own little branches.
Yeah, and then after 100 years, somebody has to do it all over again because they screw it up.
Right. Exactly.
Well, we're at the end of the show. Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate it.
All right. Yeah. Good time.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for in the chat room and calling in and just listening in. Appreciate it.
Yeah. We'll I'll see you tomorrow for our meeting, and then hopefully a nice dinner. But until next time, everyone, I want to say thank you for tuning in tonight. We'll try to keep these specials going through the summer, at least once a month, hopefully. And I don't know when the next show will be. I don't even know what the next subject will be. At the very least, we'll get one, and there'll probably be another open lines, open topics. Maybe I'll bring on a special guest. We'll find out. Sign up with the Nickelodeon Network and subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you don't miss it. Okay? Take care. God bless, and I'll see you out there in the ether.